Welcome, everyone. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Okay. We will skip the welcome and introductions because Phil kind of took care of all of that for us. We will start with the May 16th meeting summary. Does anybody have any additions, deletions, questions?
Same as Lieutenant Reporter ANN. What's ANN?
I think that's a spacing issue. It should actually
Go over
go
to
with
Dan.
Ann Ditzward.
Oh, I
Okay,
see that.
Yeah.
There we go.
okay, we'll fix the spacing, thank you.
New County and that.
Title. Did anybody have any other changes? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve.
And a second. I'm a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Dawn.
It's been moved and seconded to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Same sign.
Are there any votes in the chat pod, Lisa?
Okay, motion approved. We will then proceed to the 2024 legislative update. Skip that since.
Yeah, we'll skip that
Okay.
for the moment since Lucy's out of the room.
You want to go on to the stakeholder survey or with that?
Yep,
Okay.
we may as well jump into it because it is a big document and it has lots of information in it. I would just start out with this, that the survey was mostly done during the month of April. I believe we closed the survey sometime around May 3rd. Since that time, the team, primarily Kristen and the census, have been compiling the survey into a report. And what you're going to find is an executive summary, and then that generally summarizes the responses to each of the main question types. And it is the principal location where information about recording fees is located. And so the basic summary, which I think we have showed in other settings, at least on a preliminary basis, is that the respondents to the survey, which there were over 500 respondents from all professions and in the real estate industry, when asked the question if they would be willing to support a reasonable increase in the recording fee if it is less than the rate of inflation amount since 1985, 79% of the respondents answered yes to that question. They were further asked if the improvements that were identified as a part of the survey, that is the modernization ideas, without being specific on which ones, but they basically were asked if, of the things that you said were very important, required an investment, and needed a source of revenue, additional source of revenue, partially through a recording fee increase. Would you consider a recording fee increase to be a good investment? And 83% of the respondents said yes to that question. And I guess our interpretation of it is, when you ask a group of people, do you want your taxes raised? Generally speaking, the answer is going to be no. So we did try to provide some context for it, to say that, the fee increase would be used for something good, maybe something that they said was very important. And when you kind of couple the idea of reasonableness, below the rate of inflation, investing in something you care about, it's a pretty favorable response to the survey. Some would say, well, you kind of ask the questions to get the yes, but as tempered as we could be, and then being direct about it, anytime you're in that 70–80% range on any survey, you're doing pretty good. And we had a very, very good sample. We kept the survey open. We encouraged the stakeholder organizations to tell their members to go out and respond. Some of the stakeholder representatives even said, you should respond yourselves too. And I would say overall, we're pretty happy with the overall results in terms of participation. And I think for those who are interested in the advocacy of a fee change, it's a pretty good story to tell. So I think that's one of the primary takeaways from the overall survey. If you scroll down in your document, you're going to see a ton of open-ended comments to various questions, and in the survey report, beginning on page 6 of the survey, or if you're looking at the packet pages, page 13, you have a summary of the kind of how do you read? What conclusions can you get from all those open-ended comments? And I again would give credit to Kristen and Census for doing the most of the work on this section, because they actually did the initial read through. They actually prepared kind of the summary of the main ideas. And then after they did that, I went back through all of the open-ended comments and then compared it against what they wrote. And I did make a few edits, but really not that many. I think they did a pretty good job of capturing the main ideas. So not to do it at this meeting, but I would encourage everyone, when you get a copy of this, to sit down with a hot chocolate or a stiff cup of coffee and go through them all, because I think it generally does provide some insight into what the users and people who are active in the real estate industry think. The I'm not gonna bias your feelings any further. I just commend you to do that. The other thing that I'm going to highlight is, I'm just going to skip ahead to page. I'm going to make sure I get to the right page. So it's Appendix B is what I'm scrolling to find. Let me find that. And that's on page 24 of the report, and then page 31 of your materials. And so, I think in a previous meeting, we talked about the relationship between the modernization ideas and the survey. And basically, for multiple months, dating back to January, we put together a modernization concept paper called An Abstract of Modernization Ideas, something like that. And we tried to make sure that there was a question in the survey for each one of those ideas, and asking people to, respond. Do you think this is important, or do you think it's somewhat important, or do you think it's not important at all? And the survey respondents also had the opportunity to either say no opinion, or they could skip the question altogether. And so the data that you're looking at is what Kristen can explain this maybe better than I can, but a weighted average, and the scale was basically, from 1 to 3, or 0 if you say no opinion, essentially, but a weighted average. So if you have a response average that is 2 or above, you're solidly in the somewhat important and very important category. And you can gain some insights from the from the sum of the somewhat important percentage and the very important percentage. I do see a typo here, Kristen, in question number 6, where the very important, it looks like it's 0.89, but I think it's actually supposed to be 889. So, and there were 430 people, 34 people who said very important to that question. So I guess I would say we've labeled this document preliminary just because there are going to be typos and things like that that we find that need to be fixed. But generally speaking, you know, I think if you look at how many people and what percentage of people for any particular question said very important, and then maybe also looking at the somewhat important category, you kind of get an idea that if you're in that 2 to 3 range, that as far as a weighted average, that is a pretty good rating. And so in this particular section, Appendix B, what we tried to do is just identify the things that were most important, that had the highest rating, and then it goes down from there. And I think you know, the idea that you know, there be consistency in information across the counties, you know, rated very highly. The idea in the next question um, uh, uh, of trying to have more records online, that also scored very, very highly as far as the search application is concerned. And then moving on down the list, that you've got the idea of being able to use expanded use of associated reference scored very well, as did the idea of integrating with external systems like Beacon. There were some things that we were happy to see that they just affirmed what the status quo is. We asked a question about how important they think redacting PII is, and that also scored very favorably as we expected. And then the idea of posting location information in indexes so that it is more searchable also scored very well. It's not my intent to go through each one of these, but really just to explain to you how to read the survey results that are in front of you. Then so we had basically 3 main groups of questions. We had a few questions about fees, which we've already talked about. Then we asked questions about the search application and things like searching and how search results are displayed. And then when you skip down to, I'm gonna go to page, okay. So we're now going to be on page 37. That's where we began to talk about electronic submission issues. So in electronic submission, that very high scoring items were supporting the idea of having good communication with the recorder. That came through loud and clear. The idea of having consistent processing practices across counties in the submission rated very highly. Reinforcing what I heard from reporters many times is that documents should be legible and of sufficient quality to make a clear copy was very important to them as well as to you. And having possibly a standard referencing system across all counties also rated very well from their perspective. And then it goes down from there. The idea of electronic document management process for surveyors rated fairly well also. And so kind of going back to the idea or the question about, um, getting more records online. And we kind of use 1980 as a kind of a poll star for the question. Um, uh, and and generally the response in the survey was very positive. But as you read through the individual comments, you're going to find people who really object to that idea. Uh, and kind of, I would interpret it to mean, from those individuals that they don't view more records being online as a positive because it has an effect on their um, economic activity. Okay, and so I think you've got to look at the whole survey as a way to gain knowledge about the body of people who work in the real estate industry as a whole, and recognize that there are going to be differences of opinion, particularly in some areas. Um, the um, the origin of the survey really goes back to the charter document that we set up with the Reporters Association. And if you go back to look at the charter, there are several places where we said one of our activities is going to be to do a survey, and the survey represents that. We did not have, it has been a huge effort to get this done. And in a normal process, you might have months of committee meetings and whatever. We just didn't have time to do that. So I will acknowledge that as far as organizing the questions and everything, based on the work that was being done in the modernization discussion, I put together most of the questions here. So I will own that. But I really appreciate the work that Census and Kristen have done in pulling this together. Our intention would be to make another pass at everything from a proofing perspective. And then the other thing that will be done is to put together an overall table of contents in the beginning so that a reader can review it. But my main takeaways are: one, if you've got a good reason and you have something reasonable, there is support for a recording fee increase. I think that is a conclusion that you can take away from the overall thing. I think that another takeaway I have is that there is support for ongoing improvement. In fact, in the last open-ended question, you will find many comments. I don't have a percentage, but a lot of comments that stood out for me, basically with the users saying, we really appreciate that you are trying to continue to get better. That you're not trying to just maintain the status quo, that you have ideas for improving things overall, whether it's in the context of our land records or in recording operations generally. And reasonable people may disagree about this, but I have to declare that I think that the results of the survey do support the idea of coupling the suggestion for a recorder's fee increase with efforts to make changes and improvement. Those would be really the main thoughts that I would share. I know you have not had this for very long, as far as being able to digest it and read through it and ask questions. I get that. We aren't making heavy lifting decisions today, but I think it is good to have a conversation about what this is. The next steps after we do the kind of the final round of editing and proofreading and cleanup of it is to share. I would consider this a near final version, and to share this with the membership of the Reporters Association, as well as the stakeholders, especially the people who took the time to respond to the survey. This was not a simple survey to respond to. It took a good 20 minutes to get through it, even if you shipped a few questions. And we told the users right up front, this is not a marketing survey, you know, to ask if you like us or not. This is asking some pretty detailed questions about what you think is important or not. And we're very gratified from the standpoint of we got a lot of people to spend that time to give us their feedback. So those are my overall comments. I want to just say to the committee, we can dive into this as deeply as you want to. We set this separate meeting up specifically for the purpose of talking about things. But I'll stop my main presentation there and ask everybody to weigh in however you see fit.
Well, I have a question. Do we know, when you did the survey, did you ask them to input information like what industry they were from, whether it was
Yes.
their company or?
So the survey results that you're getting, the question, if you didn't hear it online, is did we ask questions about who the people are, what their occupation or industry was? And the answer to that is yes. So we will be able to stratify the results based on those industry groups. It's going to take us some time to wade through that. We haven't done it yet. We wanted to give the overall results first. I would say, Christian, maybe you can help with this. As I recall, we had 30% of the respondents were attorneys. Is that correct? Or
Yeah, attorneys in law offices were grouped together, but it was definitely around 30% with the highest.
and then I think the next highest group were abstract and title. Would you say that? Am I going too far in saying that?
I, without pulling it up, I don't want to confidently say that was the next one. Give me a second and I can.
What's your impression? Then I'll just ask open-ended.
Sorry?
I'm asking you just to answer the question then without putting words in your mouth. How would you describe the groupings?
We're pulling up the numbers to tell you exactly.
Okay,
So I guess my reason for asking that is, can we utilize that information to do more education with certain industries if they weren't in favor for one thing or another? What can we do more to educate them or help them?
I think that's a great idea. And our intention is we are going to produce that subset of reports. I don't think it'll take forever, but we've been working hard just to get this done. The team has been. But each of those are stakeholder groups too. And so in terms of what do they care about most when we actually present proposals to policymakers, you know, it's going to be important to know where they're coming from. And so our intention is to do that. If I had to, just based on my working knowledge of what I saw when I looked at those numbers, you have that? Go ahead.
3% for worked in kind of a law firm or attorney's office. 16% worked for abstract or title company, and 14% was surveyor or engineering companies.
Okay. So that would be consistent with my memory. Thank you for doing that. We did not get as high a response rate, I think, if we would have liked from financial institutions or from realtors. Those were not as high as we had hoped we would get, but we did get responses in those groups. It's not like any group was really not represented, but in terms of the overall results, I think you'd have to say that the opinions are maybe more weighted toward real estate attorneys, more weighted toward the opinions of title professionals, and more weighted toward surveyors and engineering firms. And coincidentally, those are three of the groups that have been most engaged in the discussion. We've had communication and separate meetings with the leadership of the Iowa Land Title Association. We've had numerous conversations with the leadership of the bar. We're still trying to get them to uh, uh, volunteer to be on some type of a subcommittee. But we've had a lot of conversations with them. And then we do have a separate subcommittee that we've been working with surveyors. And they have been very, very engaged. But the engagement we've been seeking with realtors and financial institutions has not been as high as we would have liked. But we absolutely know for sure that they were asked to share it with their memberships. We did talk to their lobbyists and representatives, and they definitely knew the survey was taking place. So, those are just choices that you make, and I'll leave it there without commenting further on individual organizations.
So we had one message in the chat pod from Melissa, asking to have a copy of the survey sent to her. She said she had some stakeholders ask, so I would just say, if those kind of questions come up, let us know. We could get that too. So we will distribute that after the meeting.
I'm going to qualify by saying we're sharing this preliminary version with this subcommittee, and as soon as I have a few seconds, there are other people in the reporter leadership that I want to share this with as well that haven't seen it yet. And so we're going to do that. As far as a broader distribution, please know that I think we would prefer, before we get it disseminated to all the stakeholder groups, we want to do that last round of proofing so that it's going to be a final clean version, and that we will be sharing it with each of the stakeholder groups. And we will be posting it on the website and including references to it and links to it in the newsletter that is going to be sent out. And then, of course, when we reach that stage, we're going to encourage all of you and everybody we can talk to disseminate it to their membership. So,
Okay, so Mel, can you confirm or clarify, did you want the survey that we asked people to respond to so you could see what they were presented with, or are you looking for the results to review? Because the results, a lot of that is included in the packet today.
yeah, and I guess in that regard, the reality is that this is a part of the meeting packet for ESS. We're a public group. It already in that form has been posted on the web now. So if you wanted to make photocopies or excerpts from the PDF and share it with somebody, as long as it has the preliminary watermark on there, I guess no reason to not be okay with that. So do it as you see fit. Thank you. Lisa, are there any other comments in the chat? Yeah. All right, other comments or questions? I'm here to answer your questions.
Well, my question is, when you took this survey, I mean, because I'm looking, I'm a little ahead of myself. But when you took the survey, and I know that we still haven't gotten to the modernization plan necessarily. But are you going to take into effect what these people gave you as important, very, very important things that they wanted? Or are we taking it all into effect? Or
I would say what you're going to see when we start talking about the list of modernization ideas is what I would interpret was most important to the users in the survey. So there are things that we asked questions about that did not make the cut. I'll give you an example. We asked a question about, how important do you think it would be to index notary information? And that did not score very highly. I kind of thought it was a good idea, but the response to the survey really didn't resonate with them. We asked a question about, do you think it would be important to record or index declaration of value documents? That did not rate very highly. We asked a question that we talked about at a previous meeting about blockchain. That just did not score very highly. And so, in the list that you're looking ahead at, what we're going to talk about, those things are not included there. We have spent a lot of time in the document formatting group talking about, hey, should we allow index legends to be used for documents other than surveys? And that didn't rate very highly either. And we kind of have concluded, I'm not saying that that's a dead issue, but our communication with the stakeholder group should be, hey, we asked you about it. You didn't think it was very important. And if you think it's a good idea, you better speak up now, because it's just not something that, there's almost nothing in there that I didn't think was a good idea from my personal perspective. But
Well, it was
but
very,
we have to prioritize.
it was
right?
very, very thorough, for one thing. I think it was very, very thorough, and I'm glad to see that over 500 people did take the time to do the survey. It made my head spin, but it was very, very thorough, and the questions were very, very good. I just was wondering, when we're doing this modernization and this is going to be our model for the legislators, I'm assuming, to ask for an increase in fees. If the percentage would be helpful to say stakeholders, or if we can ask our stakeholders for some support, because in the past, I think some of them have not registered as being supportive of that increase in fees. I mean, when you go to these individual associations, you can say, hey, look, we took the survey, it was a small portion, but this is what your stakeholders are saying. This is
Right.
what your associates are saying.
And we have every intention of doing it.
I'm sure you are. I'm looking ahead, but I was just wondering, I was curious.
In the chat pod, and Ditzworth has a question, number of questions in the survey? Is it 43?
Yeah, I think there were like 49 separate questions, including the open-ended questions. Let me go back and look at the numeric list.
I think our last question was an open-ended one, so that number is in the open-ended.
Yeah. Yeah, so there were a number of open-ended questions, yeah, but I think the total would be actually 49.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's very well put together, very thorough.
Other comments?
Well, I would agree that this took a huge effort, and I would encourage everybody to look through some of the comments and reach out to Phil and his team if you have any questions or comments. I know that was pretty daunting to try to get through in less than 24 hours. So
we understand.
again, kudos to you guys. Don't have to do any action on that. Let's back up. You're all done with that topic, Phil?
Yeah.
Okay.
Census.
Let's back up. And with census, would you like to give us the legislative update?
Regarding.
You might need to move over here.
Yeah.
Here.
They'll move. You're good.
Regarding the legislative update, I'm going to keep it brief. For Iowa County Recorder Association, our plan this year was to connect with as many legislators as we could was to start introducing the planned fee, recording fee changes and modernization project, and to have as many conversations as we can with them. That was done to the best we could. We did connect with as many legislators as we could within the different committees, which is Ways and Means as well as local government. We also spoke to the head of the committees, and a lot of them all responded that they understand it's been since it's almost 40 years since the last change happened, and they were shocked about that. And they agree that there needs to be changes to it. And most of them say they would like to see the plan and they want to see numbers. And so this is what a lot of our work has been on. And then I assisted the Record Association with County Day. County Day was, I think, a great success, according to what I've heard from most of your team members. We managed to get a lot of legislators to come to the booth and took some recorders upstairs to also meet and speak with their different constituency representatives. And they are all looking forward. And I think a number of them did say they are willing to support or even sponsor when we get to next year. So that would be the main issue, main legislative update for Record Association. In terms of ESS, it was more monitoring any form of legislation that could affect or have an impact on conversation related to electronic systems, electronic recording, issues related to technology, as well as document recording, public meetings, which we also host. Those were the main things that we focused on and main issues that we're watching out for. And that concludes the legislative update.
Thank you, Census.
You're welcome.
Thank you for all the work you're doing.
Yes, yes.
You are welcome.
You made quite an impression on some of the people there at Capitol. We noticed that on County Day Capitol. Did anybody have any questions for census on the legislative update? Okay. The next agenda item is the priority modernization projects.
So the questions that Julie asked me, you were present looking at cheating and going ahead of the agenda here a little bit, but I did want to share with you sort of the more of a compiled list of, if we were successful with the fee policy initiative and the associated policies that go with that. One of the things that was identified is that there are certain things that people are really interested in doing, and they aren't things that individual recorders' offices can do. It really fit into more of the things that are within the framework of Iowa land records. Not all of them, but a good chunk of them are. There just is only certain ways that you can do that. And what I've tried to do in this list, without putting numbers on them, is to give you an idea about what I think the priority ideas would be that are, in fact, based somewhat on the survey results, but I'm also listening to individual recorders that are on the standards committee or in the document formatting working group, paying attention to our working group with the surveyors, the things that really are beginning to float to the top in terms of things that we hear that folks would like us to do. As far as recorders are concerned, I'm looking at my friend Jamie across the table. I hear you loud and clear, a very high priority. It's something that the Recorders Association has voted on, is the idea of initiating a notification system. And so I guess one of the things I want to share with you is that last week we had a meeting of our development team. Most of the time we're doing Zoom or Teams meetings with our developers because they're working remotely, but we brought our development team into this room with Lisa and we started to go through some of these ideas, talking about, okay, how would we approach this project? If we were going to actually implement this, what would we need to do? And we began conversations on each of these things about, okay, what are our steps going to be and how would we approach that? Usually, the way software development works is the business side gets together and they say, we want to do this. And then they tell the developer what they want done. And then you have this dance about trying to clarify what the requirements are. And we don't have a big development team and we just didn't have time to do that. So we brought the developers in and we said, okay, we're going to talk about each of these ideas and then let's talk about how challenging would that project be. And software developers, they talk in a different language of their own, and there are different approaches to doing this under agile or other methods of project management. But we kind of generally use the t-shirt analogy. Is this a small t-shirt? Is this a medium t-shirt? Is this a big t-shirt? Is it extra large? How challenging and difficult would each of these be? And generally speaking, the answer from the development team was on almost everything is, well, if you can decide the business rules of how you want that thing to operate, actually the development is not that complicated. It's fairly straightforward. So the idea of creating a notification system and, you have to answer questions like, how do people access it? What are the rules going to be? If somebody sets up a notification, how long is it going to be active? Do they need to go through a process of renewal? What do you do in cases where a user signs up and then they don't log in again for 4 years? What are you going to do with all of those different rules? And then how is the notification system going to work? Are you going to use email? Are you going to want to use it with a text messaging system? There are just lots of business rules that have to be decided in order to do this. And, from our development team's perspective, I have to speak to some who have heard me say, or thought they heard me say that this would be easy to say, no, it's not easy. It will require work. But I would say that the Iowa Land Record search application is a great foundation to work from. It already exists. There's a method for people to sign up. They can do their own fraud alert searches easily just by running a search on the Iowa Land Record system. But there are things that could be done to pair an application to be notified about a specific set of criteria when something happens. And it could be either in the form of that name, identification, and maybe even various spellings of that name to say if anything gets reported and there's a party with this name, I want to be alerted. There are ways that we could do it, as we've talked about before, where somebody could say, I really just want to make sure that nobody messes with my deed. And they could use our search application, identify it, select their deed, and then say, notify me if there is any document ever that is recorded and then associated with this document, doing something to this document.
Hearing from stakeholders about a desire for consistency in the conversation with ILR development team is the option of purchasing an existing fraud alert system an option. Is the only option fraud alert
Is developing something, not us, is developing something.
Well, yeah, I do I would say that there is a possibility that we could go buy somebody else's fraudulent system or license it in some way. That isn't what I have heard people ask us to do. I my interpretation of the inquiries or the asks so far have been, can we have an Iowa land records notification system? And the answer to that is yes. And I do think it makes sense for Iowa to do that because we are a statewide system. We have methods of identifying associated documents or methods of searching that are already built. And when you get into licensing somebody's proprietary system, okay, I guess I don't know what the cost of that would be or whether it would operate well with the system that we already have. I think as we get into it, we could explore those options. It's not been our objective to take money off the table for some private company, land record management system or otherwise, to to have their system used. It was never our intentional goal to do that, but I do think we could do it. It's within our capability. It's not within our bandwidth right now, but if we have some success with the fee policy initiative, I think we could do it and make it successful. The other thing that I would just add to this that that not all of you may be aware of, but there has been some discussion about, and this is primarily with the Bar Association, about whether or not any notification system that would be created, could it be leveraged to support notification for other things, such as filings with the Secretary of State's office or maybe even our court information system. So, I don't know the answer to that question. Practically speaking, I do know the answer to the question. If external systems like the SOS were to give us access to an API where we could monitor activity within their system, then it is feasible to do something like that. So if it would be the wish of the coordinating committee or the association when we get to that point to include a review of available private sector systems as we weigh that against building our own, we can certainly do that.
Do you see the rest of Ann's question there, or do you want me to read it? It's more of a comment. I think that both should be studied if we're to make a good fiscal decision. Development staff is very costly, and adding more is a big financial item on the modernization list of fund uses. It seems that we need to be cautious as a quasi-government entity, not to compete with private industry.
Well, we're the only statewide land record system in Iowa. And if you want to have a statewide system, it probably has to involve Iowa. And so I would just say openly that, a reasonable choice. There are those who say Iowa land records should not exist because, you have all these private systems out there. And I don't think people would go back at this point if they had a choice. So I think it would be worthy of exploring the options, and then we can make an informed decision about which is best. But in terms of proportionality, I think this is kind of a project that would be within the scope of the Iowa development team, and especially if you make it your number one priority. I guess I'm not so sure to say that that government can't do things as well as the private sector. Sorry, I don't believe that. I think our team stacks up. That we just don't have a lot of bandwidth right now, but we know how to do things. You know, then you're comparing that against the ongoing licensing fee, you know, or whatever fee the private sector company would charge you for doing that.
Those charges continue to go
Yeah,
up.
so I'm not trying to argue against it. If the committee wants us to look at private sector options, we can certainly do that.
Okay, and then
But Iowa Land Records has to be involved if you want it to be statewide.
she has one more question, which is, but fraud alert exists in the private sector. So
Fraud alert does exist in the private sector, and if the committee would prefer to just have individual counties do that with their vendors, you know, that is an option.
My big thing is you can't afford it. Like I'm from Adams County and I looked into it for my county and it's not feasible for my county to.
Jimmy, do you remember the approximate cost?
I don't. I have to go back and look at my records. My gut says $8,000. That was just like kind of an initial startup. I'll have to go back and look at my numbers
You
just
know,
to see.
that sounds right. That
to
you,
see
I
what it is.
kind of remember you saying that.
And then it was so much every year that we had to keep paying, and it's just not in Adams County. budget.
$8,000 just to get started up, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
So that's what I want to say.
Okay, the purpose of this conversation, bringing up the list, is sort of to tell you the things that seem to have been rising to the top. And anything that is on the list, you should expect us to do what we do. And that is, you know, develop a plan for alternatives, put cost estimates together, bring it back to our governing committees to say, okay, this is what we come up with. Do you wish us to proceed or not? Just because something's on this list doesn't mean we're just gonna go run off and do it.
Well, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer.
Yeah,
I don't
there
want to be
is
a
a
Debbie
process.
Downer, but I am totally against this. And I know it's risen to the top and I know the majority of the reporters want this. But I've been in Polk County I've worked in Polk County and I have never had fraud, the case that couldn't have gotten settled in a court case. By the time we record it, it's too late. Anyway, I mean, we're not gonna change the way they have to go to correct it. We can't reverse it. We can't warn them against it. We can't not record it if it meets all the recording standards. So I personally don't feel it is good, and I don't even know how much happens in the state of Iowa. There are other things that you have talked about that might make good sense. But for one thing, I don't want to spend the time and the energy and the money to do this when there are other ways, other avenues for people to check on it if they want. And they can certainly check on Iowa Land Records. If they want to go there once a week. It's not going to change what happens. And there's other things that can happen with when you start setting people up to say, I want to know what happens to this property. I have a really big problem with that. If I'm being stopped, I don't want somebody to say, tell me when this property changes, or tell me when she sells this, or tell me when it moves. I think that we're buying into the fear that some of these companies have set up on late night television. I really do. And we're going to give people a sense of false security by saying, we're going to let you know when, by calling it fraud alert or calling it notification or whatever you want to call it. Instead, we should be a positive force. We should be able to say, you know, we've got the greatest, we have a great record system. And plus we're an abstract state. Plus we have the auditor that checks things. I think the state of Iowa has a great system and a great way to record things and a great way to transfer property. Instead, we're all buying here. And I'd like to know how many times it happens in the state of Iowa. Even if it happens 50 times, I can't think of one time that has happened in Polk County and if it did happen, it got settled in the courts. So I'd like to know how much money that's going to cost, because I think that the list of other things for modernization, and I get that putting it in there helps our case. But in the long run, I really feel like the notification system is a waste of time, energy, and money, unless you're going to attach it to something else. But even if you attach like liens and stuff, it's all that. Do we really want to get into all that? I just kind of think the conversation has gone kind of a little bit it has risen to the top, but it's not Polk County. The largest
And you would
county.
think if they were gonna see it, they'd see it in your county, you know, the bigger counties. But my only fear is because it's been brought up as far as legislation is concerned, I don't think we can ignore it.
I agree.
Because I think
And
that gentleman has an agenda, because he's down in my corner of the state. And I think that's gonna be his baby, and he's not gonna let it drop. So
I can too. So we have had one celebration fraud claim that was in Polk County. You're right, it's not gonna stop the fraud. It won't stop the fraud. But the sooner if that property holder had known when that deed was recorded, this property holder would have stepped in. It was vacant land in Grimes, so the new buyer started clearing the property. Put a lot of cost in that could have really been prevented if they had known about that.
Mm.
So there is a real world implication, but you're absolutely right, it's not gonna stop it. But the quicker they know about it, the quicker we can potentially stop further loss from it too. So that is my point for the fraud. I think the fraud notification is a good idea, but true too, it matters how we message it too, because we can't message it as preventing fraud, but it prevents further fraud loss.
Right, okay, so in the chat pod, Natalie, this is how it all started, that the private sector for each county would be very costly. Lindsay, she received a quote from Tyler earlier this year. It was $7,800 with an $800 reoccurring annual fee. Melissa, a fraudulent power of attorney could be filed, which could cause problems in more than the real estate world. If someone files it and I'm monitoring my grandparents' name, I would at least be aware. Lindsay says property alert is a huge issue throughout the county and been a huge conversation in Brea. I think she meant country instead of county. Okay.
The legislation didn't mention who's gonna pay for any system.
So-
Recorders.
it said recorders are gonna be responsible for notifying.
Yeah, so, there's no mention there, so that's gonna cost us if.
And maybe we could word it that way, that say if legislation passes that reporters, because we have the system, then they should fund it. They can't give us a mandate and not fund it.
You're joking, right?
I know, I'm so cute.
Yeah.
I know, I'm just joking. Because we do everything, in
We got to see that at County Day at the Capitol, unfunded mandate.
yeah.
Great, this is a great discussion, and again, sort of you have to look at this from the perspective of everything is a project, right? And
everything costs a lot of money, and I get that,
but we don't know. I'm not gonna buy into somebody saying, hey, you said this was easy, because it will require work. It will require some investment. But I also don't want you to run away from anything because of a perception that it's gonna be ungodly expensive and unreasonably expensive. I think you should expect that our future team will do the due diligence necessary to define something so that it is done practically, sustainably, and not without engagement of all of you, in terms of approving a project plan and giving us authority to move forward and verifying that the requirements are correct. The same thing is going to end up being true for most of these things. So if you look at the integration with Beacon, which is basically connecting with external systems, there was a lot of anecdotal support in the survey results supporting that, and it also scored fairly highly. Okay, how are we going to do that? Well, Kelly and I have had initial discussion with Mike Morehouser, with Schneider Corporation, about how we might approach this and what the methodology would be. We know that it's not something that we're going to do overnight. We're going to establish the methodology and probably implement it on a county by county basis. Probably it will involve the creation of an application interface so that other companies in other counties who don't use Beacon might be able to leverage it in the same way, but that will become a project that we define and outline and budget for. Every one of these things is really in that category. The normalization of location information. That's going to require extracting data from unparsed fields that already exist within the county, separating it into separate fields and then importing it into the our system, or it's going to involve identifying that information that may be in an external system like Beacon that we can say, would you give us the data for that, and then inserting it. That is going to require work and effort. It won't happen overnight, but it's not unreasonably complicated. It's a doable thing. And kind of what came out of our meeting with the developers is there's nothing unreasonable on this list that we can't do. We just can't do it with only 2.5 developers. We need an expanded development team to do this. And that's what our focus is in terms of what kind of funding does our need going forward with any of these things. You're going to see later on in the agenda, I've shared with you a survey that we're currently doing with the surveyors. And the idea about indexing older non-recorded surveys and plats is being explored through that survey. One of the questions that we're asking the surveyors is, are you willing to put some elbow grease to help gather the indexing information necessary to put this in a searchable database? And even a question about, would you be willing to pay more money as a surveyor, to contribute to some type of fund to help this? I don't know the answers to that yet, but we're asking those types of questions. And all of that ends up being in a project plan. There are some things on this list that are already on the list that we know we have to do. We have to update our external submitter API with the commercial recording companies. We can't continue to not be aware of who those commercial customers are. We need to be able to share that knowledge with recorders when you receive a document from them. Nor do we want to support in the long run their practice of abandoning groups and then just starting over again if a recorder declines it. It can be done so much better and be better for everybody on down the list. My friend Dylan to my right here, he's the one that really put the bug in my ear to say, could you do something besides email for two-factor authentication? This one's for you, my friend. So there are some things that really emerged that are, I would say, are doable, achievable, not beyond our capacity, if we have some additional development resources. Probably the only thing on here that doesn't require a lot of development work per se is the document formatting requirements. And we've fine-tuned that enough where I'm just going to say it's mostly non-controversial now. Once I gave in on letting prepared by return to stay on the list, it just got a lot easier when we made that decision to do that. Right. I'll talk about more about that, but really that's more of a policy change, but it definitely is in modernization. So I wanted to just give you a flavor. I didn't put numbers on here to say, well, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, but I would say this collection of ideas has emerged to the top of the list. And partly based on conversations with you, with stakeholder groups, and also the survey results. And then we can start putting more specific plans and budgets together. My sense is, and this kind of leads into the next part of the discussion, is if we can do from an ILR budget perspective what we say we would like to do, we can add the developers to the team that will let us get to this list. So let's get into that
Okay,
discussion.
so I'm gonna
Yes.
read some comments. From Renee, Dallas County, we've actually had 2 false deeds filed in the last month or so. Some counties already have a fraud alert included in their software package. It's not extra, it's included in our yearly package. They are a fiddler county. As a side note, those packages are charged based on the size of your county. So smaller counties are not paying what larger counties are. Then Lindsay and Jolynn, I believe your comments were a response to Julie about if it's mandated, it has to be funded. Jolynn, good comments. Natalie, Julie has some very valid points. We are going to record the documents presented, then they go to court, been there. But if the grantor can be notified, it could prevent future fraud if the same grantee was included, like it did happen. And Natalie, I believe you had to go to court. Was it last year?
2 people went to court in her county
Okay,
against the same person.
okay. And then Natalie or Anne is saying, what are the have-tos on the list? She caught update external submitter API. Are there others?
I would say, we've going through the list here. We have already done the development work on the county upload API. The hard work of that is actually working with the service providers to help them implement it. So that's not so much of a development issue as it is an implementation issue. The external submitter item, as you mentioned, long term, that is an absolute must do for us, if for no other reason than because our current API is based on unsupported platforms. It's just out of date. We have to update it. I am going to say that at some point we have to face the SMS texting issue, because if you read through the survey, one of the main complaints is two-factor authentication, and kind of associated with that is the time and process that you have to go through to wait for the email to get your code so you can enter it. That does cost money. It is an external system that we'll have to license. It's nothing that we should or would build ourselves, but it is something I think that we should do, because it's a huge user experience issue. And so the rest of them, I'll just talk about the historic surveys and plats. We're having an outstanding conversation with surveyors about refining how index legends are used and the information that's in it. It's just been so constructive. But one thing I really want to do as an organization, at least the leadership, is get more historic information online, and we just have to figure out how to do that. Let's see. I would say, the top 3 definitely are in terms of the idea of the notification system. Politically, as Lisa said, there are some ramifications of people wanting to do that. I think that the Bar Association, they've already informally said they like the formatting changes that have been drafted. Their committee's working on it right now to review it. A lot of comments in the survey about integrating with Beacon, so that kind of rises to the top. And the honest truth is that the normalization of location information is important, because our search application for platted or unplatted land is not very useful, because not enough information has been parsed. We have to figure that out if we want the location search to be useful. Back to Blue, that's on the list for 2 reasons. Number one, we have similar to the notification system, we have legislators who are keenly interested in that. And the truth of the matter is that the current Back to Blue system has no benefit, does not work very well, not very well used. And we could do it a lot better if we just changed the rules and change the programming on it. That gets me down to the multi-jurisdiction plat approval process, which is another thing that the surveyors have expressed interest in doing. It's not at the top of the list. It's near the bottom for a reason, because it doesn't affect that many people, but the idea of having a document management system for plats so that zoning departments could work more efficiently with recorders' offices, to get stuff done. From a digital perspective, there could be some huge benefits of that, and there are spin-offs from that for other workflows if we set up a system like that. The PII redaction process, I have on the list several reasons. Number one, the respondents to the survey said, yeah, that's so important. You got to keep doing that. Number two, we think that there's a potential risk of degradation of the way we do redaction today because of mergers and acquisitions that have occurred. And three, we think that if we set it up right, we could do the redaction process for less money than what we're currently spending. Right now, redaction is a $7,000 a month expense. Could we do that better and differently? Yeah, but we're going to have to invest in software development in it to do it differently. So, I think you end up with a fairly robust list of ideas that can fit under the modernization idea that if we had some more developers, it was achievable and doable because we know how to do software development. My feeling is I'm not, these are not extra large t-shirt items, maybe medium t-shirts in terms of level of effort and investment required. And I guess I just feel that with the budget outline that I'm going to talk to you about next, and what we would be able to do in terms of additional developer capacity, this list does not dawn me. Okay. Can't do it right now because I've only got 2.5 developers, and 1.5 of them are fully occupied in something that has nothing to do with this list. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So if you'll permit me, I want to just talk to you now about kind of where things stand with the fee policy. And this may be as much for the benefit of our guests and Dylan and Davis, and just to kind of see where we're at with this. But the general game plan is to have a recommendation that is supported by the Reporters Association done in June. And the next opportunity to have that conversation is the Reporters Association Summer Conference and their business meeting on June 11th. If we hit that deadline, then it's possible to incorporate whatever the plan is into the ISAC legislative program. And then that gives us from July through December to work on the fine-tuning details and then engage in advocacy with our stakeholders and our key policymakers. So that's generally the framework that we're working on. And without getting into the weeds on the numbers, listen closely, Dylan. Okay, so the Recorder's Fee Policy Working Group is leaning toward a standard fee per page, not going to a flat fee per document, but keeping the fee per page. And I think, objectively speaking, the amount of the increase can be characterized as very reasonable. And it's reasonable for two main reasons. It isn't even remotely close to what actual inflation has been. since 1985, but it's still meaningful to the recorder's offices and also to our land records. So it's well below the inflation rate, still meaningful. And then there is a simplification agenda that goes with it. So some things that add complexity to trying to predict what the recording fee is going to be would be simplified by either removing the supplemental fee associated with it, such as additional transactions, or by incorporating that within the base recording fee so that it is not an add-on. Okay, that's really the crux of it. And so you do that, and then you couple it with some of the policy changes and special projects that we are talking about, then it becomes very reasonable. Some of the specific areas of fee simplification would be potentially, I have to qualify this because it hasn't been formally adopted yet. So in the discretion category, the idea of eliminating entirely the additional transaction is not a huge money revenue source, but it does add complications and inconsistency in application from one tenant to another, just by its very nature. There is a current element in our code that calls for a non-standard recording fee. Pay the extra $10 if you don't like it, if you don't want it to be rejected. With the changes in the formatting requirements, this doesn't happen that often. Really, I think submitters would just have to accept the idea that if it doesn't meet the standards, it's going to get declined, and you're going to have to do it over again. But there's not going to be any more non-standard fee. Not a huge dollar amount, but if that were to be accepted, it kind of simplifies things because it goes away. In the current law, there is a $1 records management fee applied to every document over and above the base recording fee. It's an add-on. And the idea would be to still carve out that money for the use by the recorder's office for that purpose, for those authorized purposes, but not have it be an add-on anymore. So just imagine if you're talking about a one-page document, hypothetically speaking, let's just say the recording fee is $10 for that. That $1 allocation would come from that $10. It would no longer be an add-on. There are a couple of simplification ideas relating to each submission that are also part of this. One of the simplification ideas is that there's also a $1 add-on fee for our land records. And it kind of is a relic from when the project originally started, but it's still there. And it does have to be calculated to estimate a recording fee. Potentially that could just go away entirely. And then as another simplification benefit for particularly people who use e-submission, if we pursue the alternative funding stream for ILR that we're talking about, we could eliminate the $3 e-submission fee for browser customers. Including items I would guarantee. Okay. So we would propose to continue a separate service fee for commercial e-recording companies. We would continue a payment surcharge for customers who choose to pay with a credit card. And with the new source of funding for IOR, we could take on some expenses that counties are currently contributing to directly.
Can I just make a statement? I know you did say that this is additional transaction fee was kind of still on the table, but I hope that there's something that you prevent from getting like a commercial bank from putting 50 releases on one page, or 50 releases on 2 pages, or 100 releases on 3 pages, for whatever reason, when you have that many on one document, just to index them would be a nightmare. And so I think that the additional transaction fee should be looked at in a different way, maybe.
If you let
Are
What-
you gonna
what-
address that?
mathematically, Julie, if you look at the revenue that we see with regard to additional transactions, it really doesn't amount to that much today. If you're saying that there's a chance that that would
Absolutely,
be abused by
absolutely.
somebody not wanting to file a separate release for every transaction, I think that should be examined for sure.
Absolutely could be.
In terms of today's practice, additional transactions is not a big amount.
Well, because they get to charge the same amount of money. Whether they have, it's $7, if they put 25 releases, they're still gonna get charged $7.
Do they do that today?
Yes, they have. Not 25, but they'll put 10 on there. And it's a nightmare because they have different names and you have different book and page numbers, and to index it is a nightmare.
So two things. One is the next time you have one of those, I'd like to look at it.
Okay.
Just curiosity killed the cat, right? The other thing that was brought up was,
Or limit it.
I would say.
Or limit it if you don't wanna have to, to 2.
Farm
they-
Service does it all the time. They'll have like 5 or 6 mortgages and they'll release those.
With different names.
The cases
Not
of
different names, but it's still an official
the
transaction.
predominant, from what I have seen, the predominant use of additional transactions is in a case where there's an assignment of a wind farm, okay? That seems to be the most typical case of the use of additional transactions. Doesn't happen very often, but when it does, yeah, there's a lot of investing that goes with that. But generally speaking today, it really doesn't amount to that much budget income, for any county, really. So I would share Lisa's request to kind of see some examples of that. That may,
Well, we may not get that often. I'm just saying it's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, we may not get 20 on one, but we have before, and they've actually done it differently, but the next time. But I'm just saying, if you start not charging them, what would keep them from doing it?
Right, that's what I'm concerned with as
I
well.
mean, it's costing them the same amount of money to charge. I'm charging them if Farm Bureau sends me 25 releases on one page, I'm charging them $7 for each of those, 24 extra. So it doesn't cost them any money, but it actually makes their record keeping better if they just make one separate for each one. And it makes our records better, cleaner, I think. But if you take away that total statement, I see it as possibility.
Yeah,
So if
I'm
you-
not worried about the income that, Wright County makes from that. I'm worried about stopping them
Putting,
because once the gates open,
I mean,
I feel
like,
oh boy.
I mean, we get a package, this thick sometimes of 25 releases or 50 releases.
Yeah,
If
so
they-
they agree with you on the chat.
Right. So, yeah, I'm gonna start reading.
So I would just like that
Comments.
examined
Okay.
and thought about.
Okay, Mel, I'm gonna come back to your first comment in here. Mel said she thinks that banks will look at combining. They don't do it as often now because it's the same fee. Renee said she agrees with Julie. Renee said the fee is a deterrent to them now. Natalie is agreeing with Julie. Lindsay, a loss of revenue, and the total revenue was included in the spreadsheet, wasn't it? What it was across.
it
the
is, we estimated $31,000
Right.
statewide.
No,
Or-
what I was saying, the loss of revenue. What I was saying for the loss of revenue was the fact that if they start adding multiple releases on one document, you're losing revenue at that time. I'm not talking about the additional transaction revenue that you carved out. I'm talking about if this process, we get rid of additional transactions, then that in turn is going to be, you have 12 release of mortgages and you're only getting $7, you're losing the revenue on those 12 releases. That's what I was talking about, loss of revenue.
And if you want to maybe identify what can be charged as additional transactions that are charged, like I don't charge for assignments if it's on the same property, same mortgage. I don't charge that. I know other counties may do that. So if the committee wants to identify what an additional transaction is, I don't have an issue with that. But I have an issue with a company putting.
I like Ann's suggestion. Sorry if I fell off the screen, but you know, I think what she suggested is, you know, there are things that in the proposal when it's finalized should be written in the code to provide clarity to the issue that you've identified. And I think that could be definitely explored.
Okay, so I'm going to read some more comments here. Lindsay said additional transactions are already defined. Anne is saying if it's a one-page document with a carve out going to ILR, that will impact the new funding stream as well. Lindsay, back to loss of revenue. And then Melissa asked if you can explain the difference between browser users and commercial users.
Well, we have certain companies that are in the business of quote e-recording, and they have a business model where they make income off of e-recording, and they're oftentimes not based in Iowa, not that many of them. And I think for some type of a service fee or an access fee would continue to be reasonable. I'm more interested in providing benefits to individual companies, particularly those that are Iowa-based. And one way we can draw a distinction is if you're coming through our external submitter API, you are a commercial company. If you sign up for our browser system, you're not in commercial e-recording business. So it's really as simple as that.
What is the commercial fee? What's the commercial user fee?
Well, I don't know what the proposed fee would be, but right now they pay the $3 just like everybody else does.
But they're charging the customer an additional amount as well.
Right.
So like if you do a quick, okay, who's who, Green State is a browser. That's somebody you're probably all familiar with. CSC and Simplifile, Indicom, those are the commercial.
We didn't really talk about that, well, what you brought up, but it is a good point. Like we had a bank takeover or buy one out. There was 200, there was close to 300 assignments. I charged extra for each one of those. Would have been a lot and a lot of work for number of pages I would have got. So.
Okay. All right. Good points, everybody. So kind of this is where I try to answer the question about what happens with ILR. And the proposal or the concept that's being explored, I'll put it that way, is that there would be an allocation. If you want to call it a carve out, you can, but there's a base reporting fee. The numbers that we're looking at are based on the idea that the average recorded document is somewhere between 4 and 5 pages. So you have to kind of look at the big picture of the overall income. And so from each document's recording fee, we would carve out or allocate $5 per document that would be directed to our land records. And then we would have the authority to use it for operations and development. If we did that based on the current estimates that we've done, it would generate about $2.385 million. Our current budget with the e-submission fee of $3 and the $1 e-commerce fee and the other miscellaneous revenue that we get from our point of sale system, we generate about 1.7 million. That's what our current budget is for all of our developers and members of our team and all of the license fees that we pay to run our system. It would produce, based on those assumptions, about $634,000 in additional income to ILR, which we would use, as you look at the last bullet point, at least 3 full-time developers, 1 full-time technical support person or technician, and an additional staff person relating to training and customer support generally. And we're not different than anybody else. We've had effects of inflation on many of our licensing and operational costs. So, we need to cover that as well. I believe that level of funding would be sufficient for us to have the capacity to do everything on the modernization list. Maybe not all at once, but it would definitely give us momentum to move forward on that list. And, the actual priority list would be subject to the review of the governing bodies of ESS, and we'll have to go through those processes. So that's
I've already had one. Go ahead.
Is that 3 additional developers or 3 total developers?
as additional developers.
So my question was, if you get the 3 additional developers, are you always gonna need those once this list is done? I mean, is this something we're always gonna need? I mean, what are you gonna do
I would
about
Basically
this?
doubling your staff.
Yeah. I mean, but
I would say to maintain momentum for ongoing improvements. We're in a cycle right now where we've just within the last 4 years completely updated our e-submission service application, our search application, our payment systems, and they all go out of date. The technology is going to advance, and you have to keep investing in the system. And the overall idea is to provide substantive benefits and also to simplify reporting fees. There is a pending discussion about should there be some adjustments in the auditor's transfer fee. That's an additional calculation, and there are conversations that are happening with the county auditors group to see if we can figure out a direction as to go. I would share with everybody, most of you know this, but everybody that isn't been a part of this conversation, we've done financial modeling, we've done different types of scenarios. And as I said at the top of this discussion, the concepts are going to be shared with the full membership of the Recordings Association. And when we have a direction from them, then there'll be more detailed conversations with our stakeholder groups. But this is a pretty good description of what
This is gonna take a while, number one. And then once it, especially like the statewide notification system, if that does get set up, you're gonna need staff. You're gonna need somebody to monitor that.
it. Yes.
Yes, you're gonna need an administrator.
I
Exactly.
could speak to that absolutely. When we switched
And-
interfaces,
well,
it
yeah,
was.
All of this is
it
gonna
was a-
take,
it
it's
was
not
a
gonna
priority.
take like tomorrow.
So the question was, would we need to maintain that staff? I think that the list that Phil presented is the tip of the iceberg of things that both we as a team and users have said, you know what I would really like is if we could do this. It is.
And that's stuff that we can work on.
I was just asking, I was asked, so.
Right, that's
No,
right there.
it's a good question. That's a good question.
Great. Melissa, could you please cover page 3? What do you estimate the cost of local maintenance fees to be for all 99 counties? And then one follow-up question. All of those expected uses for staff are additional. Yes, that's what we've said. I'm assuming that would include benefits. Do you have a cost estimate for that item?
Yeah, I am including, so it hasn't advanced to the point where I'm so confident that I've got the budget for you, ready for your approval, but we have done modeling of what would our budget look like. And this does fit within that budget. We've gone through, and I mean, you've seen as a committee how I go through the line items of everything that costs. We do include benefits in our cost estimate for each of our positions. I use the costs of our current development team members, maybe with a bit of an inflation adjustment to estimate what the cost of the additional positions would be. And, you know, these are $100,000 plus positions, particularly if you include benefits. So, you know, if you think about that $600,000 increase, a good chunk of it would be for expanding the development team. If certain economic factors were to improve, we might have a little bit more flexibility. But the reality, you know, you have to say, the calculus for me is, if I were to set a target that would be reasonable and achievable, $5 a document seems to be real, given that we're already charging for $1 a document for everything that gets recorded, plus $3 a document for the 60% of documents that are e-filed. That's what we're already doing. So a $600,000 increase is not an outrageous jump, particularly if we invest it in our internal operations. Then I think the other question was, how much does the local maintenance fee cost? I believe that we estimated for this year about $315,000 in total cost, what we pay the service providers. We pay Tyler Technologies and Solutions Harris over $100,000 a year for their support of all of their counties. Okay, it's not cheap. The individual counties that maybe only one service provider, I can't say they're getting well compensated because everything's on a per county basis. But you know, it is real money. It's certainly for the small counties, it's real money to them, for sure. So if we could use a portion of this, you know, to help cover that cost, then I think that, again, that is a benefit back to the counties that we're not able to do today. Did I answer all the questions?
I think we've got it. To everybody online, are we missing anything?
Was maintenance fee taken into consideration to our overall like increase to the fee?
Ask me that again.
So, okay, so like Adams County, I don't even remember what it is, but like, so my maintenance fee is like $1,500 or whatever it is. Was that taken into consideration in your fee models?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and Jimmy, yours is a net, okay, because of cost sharing.
Right.
So otherwise it's 31.
Well, I mean, it's gonna be,
Is it 3160 this year?
it's gonna be, we're assuming an expense of somewhere between $150,000 and $175,000 that counties are currently contributing to. And that goes away for the counties and gets absorbed into that budget.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the idea. And, you know, I understand some of the questions that we received from some reporters in our discussions has been, gee, you know, you're gonna have for a one-page document, $2 goes to records management, $5 goes to ILR, that was $3 to go to the county general fund. And mathematically, that is a true statement. But if you look at actual practice for reporting documents, averages between 4 and 5 pages, that revenue is going to be there. And again, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but revenue to the counties, even taking those carve outs, would increase between 45 and 70% if this general plan were to be implemented. So there is benefit to the county as a whole. There would be benefits to the individual reporter offices, and then there is a marginal increase for ILR to do things that people have said they're willing to do.
Okay, Melissa, that is the number for local maintenance. It leaves about half the projected increase for staff.
Well, if the revenue increases by $600,000 $30,000 or $680,000, I
Right.
forget which it was. Let me go back.
633.
So 633, 634. Yeah, $150,000 of that would be to go to cover those maintenance costs.
No, it'd be more, the 300.
150,000 more would go to cover those maintenance costs. So that leaves you with five or
And
475.
so Melissa said, you said the 315 was the total.
Yeah,
Okay.
but we're already paying.
Yeah, you're getting.
We're already paying
Getting
for
some from the county.
over half of that, right?
Okay.
That's already in the
Oh,
budget.
in the cost sharing.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
Okay. So, okay. And then, Natalie said, what fiscal year would this be?
I'm operating on the assumption that the legislature acts in 2025 and the new structure goes into place July 1, 2025. That's what everything's based on right now. So I put together a sample annual budget for Iowa beginning in 2025. Depends on how the legislation is written, but I'm estimating. You know,
Because you have to start somewhere.
I have to start somewhere.
Right.
And I basically took the budget that we have right now and said, okay, what would it cost to add X developers, to add an additional customer support position, to pay our license fees and all of our other overhead, taking into account inflation and, you know,
Bill Viteto was
still
the
count the revenue we get from the point of sale system. That doesn't go away. And
you still got some of the
If-
original.
you end up with a fully expended budget similar to what we have right now, with not a lot of net income to put in the bank. We've been using it for things I think people want us to do.
Eric's long. Trying to speak.
Eric, did you have a comment?
What are we talking about?
Eric, I think he was speaking. I think maybe he unmuted by Eric. Natalie, you're unmuted. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so these are all new, I guess, staff, right? Even the one trainer, customer support. And the three developers, those are new. I just,
Yeah.
so I was thinking about like Kristen, as far as her being currently part-time. Is this like moving her to full-time, or is this an extra position?
This would be in addition to, so we would have
The question is, would you move Kristen's position to full-time?
I don't know the answer to that yet, but possibly yes.
I would just like to say that I recognize all the work that has gone into the modernization study, and I will fully support the committee because I know the work that's put into it. I just wanted to voice my opinions. And as the largest county, I think that I see that we're going to be putting in a little bit more extra too. So I just wanted to say thank you to the committee and thank you to Phil, because getting these numbers together is mind-boggling. And I've seen all your estimates and estimations, and you're also always pretty conservative. And I trust that these are pretty conservative. And I know these are kind of based on this year's numbers anyway. So we're hoping that there's going to be an uptick in the economy soon, especially whenever the interest rates go down, then everybody's going to refinance again. So I think there will be a boom eventually someday. So I appreciate the fact that you've been conservative and using using the lower numbers, because that's where we are right now. And I appreciate all the work that the committees have done And it's a lot of work, I know. And sometimes when you get 99 opinions, as you do every day, it's hard to make everybody happy. So thank you for listening and thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
Lindsay's comment, I believe if we're going to increase initiatives, there's a need for a full-time communications role.
Okay. All of that will be when a real budget gets put together. So, okay, other questions on this topic? Kind of the intent at this point would be, I want you to put your ESS hats on, okay? If you're on this call and you're on the governing committee, you're putting on your hat to say, I'm here, at least in part, to advance the sustainability, viability of our land records. An external process has been followed to come up with the ideas that are being presented to you today. And if you're being ESS and being selfish in that regard, a question for this group, which I'm not asking you to take any formal action on today, but as the governing board for ESS, does this plan make sense to you? Because the Recorders Association, and I know we're all very close, but they're going to go in a room on June 11th and have a discussion about what they want to do. And I think a fair question to you as the governing board would be, does this outline and the general budget parameter and the approach to generating that budget resonate with you? Is this something that you feel comfortable with? Because there are other ways to do it, okay? And at one point in this external planning process, I knew somebody was going to ask me, well, how much do you need? What does Iowa Land Records need? And I had to go answer that question, and I did the process I described to you. I said, well, let me see if I can put a budget together. If I could do everything I wanted to do, what would that be? And that budget was way bigger. We have to be real. You know, what is a realistic thing to ask for? And so it got back to $5 a document, 2.3 something million based on 2023, potentially some upside if the economy improves. Could we do it for that? And as a project manager, I concluded, yeah, we can make stuff happen at this level. Because I'm not just in maintenance mode now. We actually can be creative and put resources together and figure out a good path. And when I went to the policy group, the fee policy group, my opening was, I need a $5 add-on. I don't care what you do with your liquidity plan. I need $5 to do what you want me to do. And the policy committee came back and said, no, Iowa is important to us as well. And they said, we're comfortable doing this carve-out approach because it's $5 per document and the average documents are between 4 and 5. We're still going to get a meaningful increase in not only the recorder's budgets by doubling the records management amount, but also the county budgets that would increase, depending on your assumptions, somewhere between 45 and 70%. That's where that group came up with. So I'm coming from the perspective of, if you want us to do everything you want us to do, it's going to be $2.4 million in terms of total budget. And I'm delighted that the fee policy group said, no, this is important to us. But that's a different question. You guys are the governing committee. How do you feel about the general game plan that we presented to you? Again, not asking you to take a vote, but kind of what's your gut say about, is this right track, wrong track? Do you have concerns? Is it good? How do you feel?
Well, I feel that the modernization plan, I mean, I lived through trying to get more money for the last 18 years, which they've been turned down. I think that the modernization plan is very well put together. I think that, and I have to ask this question because I really was paying attention. I really tried to pay attention really, really hard. But the dollar for the management fee and the dollar for the that goes into Fund 21 for the counties, is that still in there?
No, it goes away.
So that goes away?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens to the state with their money? They don't,
We're going to have a conversation with the state treasurer about how to handle that. But we have roughly $250,000 sitting in the state treasurer's office right now. We'll have to figure out what to do with that. And honestly, if we take this approach, maybe that carve out ends up going to the state treasurer's office, similar to the way we do it today.
I really like my Fund 21 because I like it.
Are you talking about the RMA?
Yeah.
That stays, it goes to
Getting
$2
now.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
I was asking about.
Okay.
That stays.
So
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
that records management money that you get
Yes,
put in.
That's my Fund 21, sorry.
Okay, that's different.
Oh, that's, yeah, I'm sorry. No, Fund
So
21.
what
is
would
mine.
happen there is, because it's a carve out, your county treasurer would allocate that to that fund.
Okay, that's what I was.
Instead of
that's
being
what-
$1, though, it would be $2.
Gotcha. I was trying to pay attention.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
That's okay. That's all right. Because I was gonna say no. But I think that you have gone outside the box instead of just going up there and saying we haven't been having an increase since 1900. You have made a plan that makes sense for an increase, and it sounds to me like after census has gone up there, and I'm sure Stacy and Megan have gone up there and spoken to legislators, they see more of a plan involved in how it's going to modern. And I love it that it's called this, and I love that the plan is not since 1900. So I think that this is a great plan, and I still have a little concern about the notification system, but I'll listen to it. I'll listen to that. I mean, I think that the other part of the notification system that you said, like maybe getting the Secretary of State's office involved and all that, but it just sounds like it's really broad. But I totally am okay with all this. I want to see the rest of the plan too, though. But-
And you made some suggestions of refinement
Yes.
too. So
But thank you. And thank you to the committee.
I like the plan as well. I like that it's a simple fee. Should be easy for people to file documents. And I think the carve out, that's not nowhere near where I thought it was going, but I do like the idea of having the carve outs already built in to the fee. And I think it's a reasonable increase and a stakeholder, but I can't see why they would be against it at this point. They've got a pretty good plan put together.
Do you have any sense for, I know there aren't any other states that have a system, but maybe neighboring states as counties that do have an e-filing or e-searching system, how they fund those systems?
there really isn't any other system like what we do.
Right.
And there aren't many systems that I would say there are a few systems that might provide access to records online, but they encourage an access fee.
Gotcha.
for their searching.
So by users, not by.
Right,
Yes.
so they have users. And if you go through the open-ended responses in the survey,
Mhm.
I didn't count them up, but there's a noticeable number of people that say, please keep the search free.
Yeah.
Please keep the search free. And this plan does that. We are not advocating for a separate fee for searching.
So one of the things, now you brought that up, one of the things that I saw in the open-ended questions was, I think, about Illinois. And it said something to the effect that they're able to increase and decrease their fees.
As individual counties,
Oh,
yes.
individual counties
Yes.
in Illinois, like,
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah.
Interesting, okay.
Is that because part of Illinois is abstract? Isn't there a part of Illinois that is an abstract state or not state, but abstract county? I think that like half of them were.
I'm not sure for Minnesota, I'm not sure.
So with Illinois, they structure the counties based on population size. And that determines which county charges which amount. There are a certain group of counties that can only charge a certain amount and others can go. $98, $70.
In Minnesota, I think.
Should you repeat what census just said?
Census is saying that fees are structured by county size, is that correct?
In Illinois.
In Illinois. And I noticed that, I did minor 5-minute research one afternoon when we'd had a conversation about something. And especially in Pennsylvania, that like the city of Philadelphia, how much higher their fees were. It was amazing. So if you ever have an opportunity, Google reporting fees in Pennsylvania and read through it.
We checked one state, I don't remember now, it was South Dakota, Montana, or somewhere, it was Oklahoma. Every type of document was different. It was like $37 for this county, and the plat was $27, and oh my gosh, I'm like, oh Lord, that would have been a nightmare. So I think ours is very reasonable.
Well, I'm gonna echo Julie's consent and kudos to the committee for doing all their research. My only one concern, and Nancy kind of hinted at it, is with the additional staff. I would like to see more research in that as far as numbers of customer support issues that are handled. When it comes that time, I'm not saying now, but if we get that, I would just like to have more justification for the amount of employees that we're asking, because that's a pretty big increase. I understand that, doubling the number of developers might be a good thing, but is there ways that we could maybe do that with 2 instead of 3 or that type of thing? I guess it's just that's a big jump.
I think we'll be able to answer that question, when we get more specific project plans put together. I have received some questions about, could you, for some of these, could you hire outside developers temporarily to help you get some certain things done? And the answer to that is yes, we could. And I'll be better able to answer those questions when we start actually getting the plans.
Because I
put together.
share her concern
And-
that if we hire these people, are we gonna keep them? I mean, once
Well-
we get through the initial projects, I know you understand you'll need them for that, but then long term,
Yeah.
are we gonna
Well,
need that? many?
okay. Where we are at in the planning process right now, based on my experience, I can confidently say that we could figure out how to do everything everybody wants us to do with additional resource pool. It takes us beyond just figuring the tax maintenance, okay? $633,000 is meaningful to what we are able to do. You, as the governing committee, I'm gonna have to bring a budget to you. And I'm gonna have to seek your authority to, are we gonna hire somebody or are we gonna do a combination of outsourcing or whatever? And we'll know that better when we get there. But I can say confidently, this general direction puts us in a position to be able to make that choice. And so, when the time comes, I'll give you the core details. I just don't know
I'm
them
just
today.
thinking, if I approached my board of supervisors and said, I want to double my staff, they're
Yeah.
gonna want to know exactly what my staff is gonna be doing to I mean, I would have to justify it. So I understand
Yeah.
that you've thought of that and that
I-
that's in the game plan.
I'm just gonna echo what Lisa said. I wish I could better communicate how deep our backlog of development is.
Yeah.
It's deep. And then we've got recorders all over the state. I bet the percentage would be at least 80% saying IOR doesn't answer my needs as quickly as I would like to, because there's an issue with one document here or one document there. And I have to absolutely say, yeah, you're probably right. It just doesn't stack up in the priority list, and we can't do that. An additional team member or team and a half member to work just on technical support issues would be a huge benefit. So, yeah, I am very confident in the need. The mix when we get there, that's all subject to planning. We'll get-
One other thing, Lisa, is what Phil said about hiring outside developers. So it's important to remember that they bill at somewhere around $150 an hour going up.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they,
So
I'm sure they do.
a full year of one developer at that rate is probably around $300,000.
Well, plus, as we all know, knowledge is important in our business. And once somebody learns what we do and how we do it, we wouldn't want to lose that knowledge. And it would take a while for somebody that's from the outside to come in and learn all that. And we know that there's a lot to what we do. So.
Other comments? Let's finish this comments and then we can have lunch. Any other thoughts you
Let me
want to
check
share?
the chat pod real quick. There is nothing in the chat pod. Yeah, Travis sent a message that he was dropping off for lunch.
My
So,
only other thing would have been relative to their station plan approval process. I think the emails that I got were, that would be maybe not feasible because every county has their own plan.
For
Like
which?
For the plat approval.
Oh, well, it is more feasible maybe than they think. And again, a specific plan would have to be put together, but the basic idea is universal, and that is provide a means for the professional surveying community to present an electronic document instead of taking in a paper document. And it would work very similar to a current e-submission process. Presented to the zoning department, and they do their review, create a mechanism for them to accept or decline, and
Only
to
if they
give,
want to use it.
yeah, and it would be voluntary, and we'd have to go tap people into it, but boy, I observed that how they do things in the paper world that just boggles my mind.
But I guess my thought is somebody might say, so we're gonna pay for a system that we don't have to use. They don't want to use it. Why would they want to contribute for it? I'm just devil's advocate.
Well, our main constituency right now is the survey would want to use it, and then we'll find that out if they do. Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to
So-
get the counties to agree. You
Yeah.
got the auditors to.
Yeah. So
There's an issue.
you've shown remarkable capacity with that technology. So
Yes.
anything else, Lisa?
Oh, well, you've got this future structure and funding. I'm assuming that's what we've been discussing.
Well,
We have that as an approval item. What are you
I
wanting?
cannot ask for your approval today on that formally. And the reason is that we had an agenda publication issue. And the notice that was given out only listed the meeting summary as an action item. The agenda that is a part of your packet did not get published in time. And so I cannot ask you to take any formal action on that at this time. But that's why I'm kind of asking for a strong sense of comment and direction as opposed to taking a formal action. There will be an opportunity at a future meeting for you to give your yes and no's, but we can't do it today.
I would say then if. there's no
I
further
would say
discussion,
this is
you
a good breaking point for lunch. You want to take 20 minutes and have lunch for those who are here. And that would put us reconvening right at 12:30. Is that acceptable?
Acceptable.
All right, I'm going to pause the recording. And I believe lunch is out on the table. So,
Yes, it is.
So we'll continue on with stakeholder communications, surveyors committee.
okay. So, we kind of alluded to each of these topics when we were talking about the stakeholder survey, but we wanted to give you an update on kind of where things stand with each major stakeholder group. And then if let me look through the list, but if David is back with us, he could add any comments he might have about the Bar Association. Probably I'm going to turn to Dylan for any observations he might have in the title world when we go through this. But one of the reasons we set up a separate meeting is that we have so much business that we always talk about that, we just run out of time just to have a conversation about, hey, what's going on, and to kind of get up to date on things, not just related to our project, but things like PRIA as well. So we're going to try and use the next hour and a half just to have that conversation, give you updates, answer questions that you may have, hear your input on whatever we're talking about. And so we'll jump into that now. So what I have, I'm going to skip ahead in the packet, and we're going to talk about the recent activities with the surveyors committee. So give me a moment here. I'll jump ahead. So the first thing I wanted to share with you, we talked a little bit about the whole idea of historical records, historical surveys that have not been recorded. And the idea is to gain access to those documents, many of which may still be in paper form, and to convert or digitize those documents and then make them accessible online. And the idea is to do that through our land records. So we got to figure out how we're going to do that. The first step that we're taking is working with the Surveyors Association to survey their membership. So we collaborated with them to put this survey instrument together. This is in PDF form just to share it with you, but it's actually in electronic form. And we provide them with the links, and then they go to SurveyMonkey and they fill out the survey. We're generally asking the members of the Surveyors Association to say, do you have access to non-recorded but historical records dating back to 1990? Okay, so in discussions with the surveyors, they said, in terms of utility and usefulness, it might be interesting, but not really helpful to our profession if we go much beyond 1990. That is backwards in time. So we put that as a parameter. And then we said, do you think, first of all, as a threshold question, they're asking their membership, do you think it would be worthwhile to have some effort to digitize these records and make them available online? And I thought I had it in here, but maybe it's later. Oh, here we are. That was the first question. So as of May 28th, we had 51 responses from the surveyors organization, and the vast majority of them said, yes, this would be very worthwhile. So other parts of the survey, it's really divided into two main parts, and that is, do you have access to unrecorded surveys or corner certificates? And if you do, what date range is it? And do you have, how many do you have access to? Less than 100, between 100 and 500, and more than 500. So we've received 51 responses as of a couple of days ago, and we are providing our Survey Monkey platform to conduct this survey. But it was the Surveyors Association that actually sent the message out to their members with the link and said, hey, please fill out the survey. And so follow-up questions were, who is the surveyor associated with these historical documents? We are asking them, is it primarily in paper form, or do you have it in PDF or TIFF, or is it a combination of the two? We're asking them, have they organized them? You know, have they indexed them in some way? How did they get filed? Do you have access to that information? And so we've given them several different ways to answer that question. That's relating primarily to surveys and corner certificates. There's a second type of document that they're interested in finding, and that is what they refer to as a railroad strip. They also call them validation methods. To be honest with you, I have no clue exactly what these are, except that they, I assume, represent the right of way of a rail line within a specific geographic area. And so we're asking the same set of questions. Do you have access to them? What date range do you have access to them? How many of them do you have access to? And tell us information about who the surveyor was, what form they are, and are they digitized or are they only in paper form? And then, as I mentioned earlier, we also asked them a question, would you support a funded method to help make it happen? And the answer to that will be telling. And the other question was, would you, this is speaking to surveyors now, would you participate in a volunteer effort to help create the indexing? It might be in the form of an Excel spreadsheet or a table that says section, township, range, date of the survey, strip map, name of the surveyor, county. Okay, nothing extraordinarily elaborate, basic indexing information. And what will happen when we tell you the results of the survey, we'll have a conversation, our subcommittee of jointly reporters and the surveyor leadership will sit down and say, okay, is this meaningful? Do we have enough critical mass? You know, how are we going to go about this? And so what will happen if they say, hey, yeah, this is worth doing, then I would imagine that we would, or they would ask their surveyor members to create, if they don't exist already, the digitized instruments, to create the PDFs and to participate in some effort to create an indexing information so that it could be imported into a database. That's sort of where we're at. Then we will have to face the question of, okay, how do we want to provide access to it? One option that we will look at is maybe a separate database and maybe a related but separate search application just for this, so that if there's any concern about it, we're not confusing people with recorded documents. On the other hand, it would be possible to assign an indexing reference number and the indexing information in a manner that would hopefully be clear that they were not recorded instruments, and possibly even add a watermark or some sort of indicia saying not recorded, okay? And that could be imported into the OWL database so that it would be searchable just like any other record, except that if anybody found it, they would see that it would be clearly flagged, not reported, okay? you know, the surveyors would have to figure out how to use it, but then it would be accessible to anybody through the regular database. None of that has been decided yet. Okay, I'm just speculating as to how the conversation might go, but to me, it reflects a very constructive step forward with the surveyors, and we'll see what the results lead us to do. Our next meeting is going to be next Monday. We had to reschedule because of Memorial Day, and we'll see what they have to say about that. So that is part one of the surveyors update. The other part that I would share with you, I'll get into more details later in the agenda, but we are talking with them about updating requirements for index legends, trying to create some more consistency, not just in reporting, but how they're presenting information to reporters so that it might be more complete and understandable, helpful. We did a survey of reporters earlier this year, just asking for impressions of what they thought about the index legend, and generally reporters had very positive things to say about the work of surveyors to prepare index legends, but they said some things that we've been hearing in other places, and they said, I wish the surveyors would be more consistent about how they completed the index legend. So we're having those conversations, and later on, when we get to the policy part, we actually have started to develop a new section of section 331 of the Iowa Code in the reporters area that would, in one place, provide all of the reporting standards for surveys, class 20 certificates, and so on. Nothing there you would find surprising or objectionable. And we happen to have a member of the committee with us today. Nancy, you want to provide any observations about how the discussions with surveyors have been going?
Well, I think we've had a really good committee. They're very positive on what we're wanting. And I think we're trying to be equally positive on what they desire to have. I think we've both agreed that the section township range is important. That's a big item to put even for lots in town, because that's what helps them find properties. They search, I mean, not necessarily find properties, but they do use that. It would make it more searchable.
Right.
So I think overall it's been.
And there are actually two parts to that conversation. One of them is that if they want to be able to search a platted piece of property by section, township, and range, they need to be putting section, township, and range in their index legend so that it is plainly known. And then the other part of it is on the reporter's side. If this were to go in that direction, the reporters would be asked to, if it's platted, sure, lot, subdivision name, city, town, also section, township, and range. And so there are things that we probably will have to have a conversation with your local service providers about to make sure that that is the way the indexing is set up. And we're going to have to make some adjustments in the our database as well, so that those elements are active and visible. Emphasize no final decisions have been made on anything, but I agree with Nancy. It's been a very constructive conversation. Are there comments or questions from the group?
There are, and I've lost connection, so you'll need to read them, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, I don't think it has anything to do with blockchain. It really is just a matter of providing easy, online, searchable access to documents that were not recorded for whatever reason.
because they didn't have to record them until 19, was it?
Right. Yeah, so, so that really is the issue. I think we identified that it would be a barrier to have a surveyor record a previous survey done by a different surveyor. The concern generally would be, I'm a surveyor, I can't take professional responsibility for a survey that somebody else did, but it sure would be nice to have access to it online. And right now, individual survey companies have possession of this information, but it's not accessible to anybody else. And so they're saying to themselves, what can we do to provide access to it? And so the idea is not to have them recorded and be responsible for it, but to be clear and to provide online access to it with a clear disclaimer that it's not recorded. Whoever is providing it isn't certifying it or verifying it, but it is useful information. So I hope I answered your question. And one more. Crazy that it'd be our IOR index, we had nothing to do with it on a county level. Maybe they need a surveyor's index for things like that. That has been part of the discussion. And I would say nothing has been decided. I'm probably going to take the contrarian view, and that is IOR is sort of a universal resource. And yes, we are representative of the official record in the county, but as Dylan would say, we're not the official record. And because of that neutral status, it doesn't seem to be a big barrier to say, use our tool to house this, provide online access to it, to search it, because we're not asking that the records be put in the recorder's index. Okay, because it's not being recorded, it's just creating access to it. So if recorders have a strong feeling about that, or if the ESS committee has a strong feeling about that, then we'll need to discuss that, okay? I can only tell you, from my perspective, it is feasible and more efficient if we incorporate it into the ILR system, provided we have the necessary disclaimers and visible indicators that these are not recorded documents. I think that's important, but we can do it. It's feasible. More feasible in my mind than, say, creating a separate database and then hooking it up to a separate search application. I don't have a compelling reason to keep it separate. Not decided, just conversation at this time.
By separate, you mean like a totally separate different system or accessibility on Iowa land records? Separate.
I wouldn't say necessarily separate in the sense that it couldn't be an application, like a mini application on our, it would require to do that, but it is possible for ILR to maybe have a separate link, search historical non-recorded surveys and then maybe leverage what we have so far. But on the other hand, I don't really have a compelling reason to not just let somebody search for it using the regular search application. Why make them go to 2 different places to do that if you don't have to?
I think it's really important to have that disclaimer that that's not a part of the official public record, right?
And
Because
it would have,
Yeah.
it would have a
You're
lot of
gonna
whenever they
confuse
abstract
the
or
general
not, they're gonna be
public.
worried about
But if the
Title
disclaimer
issue.
is there,
I think it opens the conversation anyway.
Yeah.
Disclaimer
Good for
is.
historical purposes?
Yeah.
Okay.
It could be, and I could certainly see how surveyors would really want it, but from a title and abstracting standpoint, I think that disclaimer language should be very important.
I think
You guys
the,
wouldn't pick it up to put it in an abstract.
Right. They're not gonna want to put an abstract.
What happens if John Q. Public gets a hold of that and thinks that's a legal survey and does something with it, even though there's a disclaimer on there, what kind of liability do you
What
have
could
for
they do?
just? I'm just
I mean, if
thinking.
they argue with their neighbor over it, you still have to have a surveyor. Apparently it's correct, but
Right.
Okay, so questions online or comments, Natalie, maybe surveyors should only have access. Melissa, I like your idea, Phil, about ESS and reporters communicating their feelings. Maybe some of these questions should go out to a survey to the ICRA to get a sense of our opinions as well. From Aaron, are the surveyors amiable, amendable? I think it's amiable to not only helping index, but helping fund this type of project.
it's one of the questions on the survey.
Well, I think that one of the questions, Aaron, on the survey is, would you be willing to contribute financially in some way to help pay for the project? We'll find out.
Could you put like a disclaimer across the front of it that's got kind of a ghost that says not?
There's a watermark on each document.
Yeah, like
Right.
we'll go across and if they wanted a copy without the watermark, we could stamp it. And make a copy in our office for them. I mean, so they could kind of see, you could see through the watermark, the ghost of it, but.
Because when you talk to them, the surveyor's offices that close, like this one, I don't remember which guy was talking about it. They got hundreds of surveys
Yeah.
from the company that closed, so they keep those. So, they could be useful for different things. I know we have a local surveyor. He puts an affidavit and has recorded a couple because they're legitimate. He was a certified surveyor at the time. So he just puts an affidavit that, it was found and this was a survey. So, but that would be expensive for them to try to do that with hundreds of documents. But yet they have a use in helping the surveyors now.
So would we charge?
I'm sorry.
So would we charge them if they're giving them to us?
I think here we are looking at us trying to find a feasible way to get the objective accomplished. And let's not forget that we're asking them to support a broader initiative. So I think you have to look at it from that perspective. So what can we do to help each other?
An unmandated function, you mean? An unfunded mandate? Unfunded mandate?
Well, if they're putting elbow grease into helping digitize the records, if they're putting elbow grease into going through the effort of taking information from the document and getting it into a spreadsheet or a CSV form so that it can be converted into a digital database, I would say they're contributing to it in that regard. I think this is what groups do when they collaborate with each other. They talk about how to get it done, and sometimes compromises are made. Yes, Melissa, I am specifically referring to soliciting their support in the process for the modernization initiative broadly. Yes, I am. Other comments? So this is a discussion. There's a committee of reporters and surveyors that are working on it. And, glad to have your input on that. So that's the generally where the surveyors update is.
I can't tell them after that committee meets, before anything's done, will this group have a say in whatever that committee recommends, or what's the?
I'm going to say the same thing that I did when we were talking about the modernization initiative. There's going to have to be a project plan. It's going to have to be brought forward. I would imagine interested parties like that Iowa Title Guarantee Group might be asked their opinion about, how they feel about it, particularly if it's going to be commingled with the public record in some way. So, yes, it's a recommendation. For example, one of the questions in the survey was, would you be willing to pay something like an extra recording surcharge temporarily to put money in a fund to help make this happen? Okay, we're gonna would be a part of the legislation if that were to come to fruition. And most certainly, it's a separate project plan under the modernization initiative. So I think there are going to be many opportunities for input. I think it's a cool thing that this conversation is even happening. Because but for this conversation, it wouldn't happen at all. So.
Okay, Anne's comment, more detailed reports from those committees would be beneficial to all on a regular basis. Aaron has a number 5 in there, so that might be an error. Aaron,
Mistype.
okay,
Well, I'm going to say that this meeting is a part of the reporting process. Okay, and you have a group of basically 8 people that have been meeting once every 2 weeks for 3 months now, and they're coming up with ideas. And this is an appropriate time to begin sharing that because the ideas have developed that far. And so I'm not sure what more report there is, because this is really the first time that we've had things develop to a point where we have something to share. And later on in the agenda, I'm going to show you the current draft of what that legislation might look like to create a separate section on surveys. So this is a next step in sharing information. And I think we're appropriately reporting at the right time, because any previous report would have been totally speculative. I would just be reporting to you, well, I think we're going to talk about this. Now we've got some things that are more concrete, like an actual survey and an actual draft of a document that everybody will be able to see. Come back to that when we get to the policy section. The next part of the stakeholder update I want to talk about is the Bar Association. So I think it was at the last conference, the spring conference, was it? That somewhere in there I made a comment to say, hey, sounds like the Bar Association is interested in participating in a committee. And we have been communicating primarily with the chair of the Bar Association real estate section, and also their legislative representatives, their lobbyists. And the discussions with the bar chair have been super positive, interested, wanting to work, but they're also super busy. So we just haven't got them to the point where they said, okay, we're ready to have a subcommittee. We are ready to set up a working group. They just haven't gotten there yet. So we're continuing to press for them to participate in that, particularly the focus on the document formatting issues, because that would affect them, and I just don't, it doesn't pay for them to be surprised, right? We got to talk to them about that. So that conversation is going on, but those conversations led to a small additional step, and that is we got a meeting with Harry Shipley and the staff at the Iowa Bar Association who administer the Iowa Docs program. And we did share the document formatting drafts with them and asked for their input. I actually had a Zoom session, Census was there as well, to ask them their opinion. And generally, after having reviewed what we provided to them, they, as staff people, said, we're pretty okay with it. But we want to review it with our Iowa Docs committee. And we said, wow, that's a great idea. Go do that. And this was maybe 2.5 weeks ago when that happened. And so we said, great, go do that. By the way, our governing board should be meeting on May 30th. And if you had any feedback for us by then, it would be great. We're still waiting on the feedback. So we're going to continue to work with them, trying to make sure that they're doing their homework and giving us feedback. But we did get one baby step done. And that is, I asked them, you know, I would love it if you would take one of your hourglass documents and if you would implement it with the new document formatting requirement of no less than 10-point type. Tell us what that looks like. Show us. So what I have on screen right now are two documents. A warranty deed without a cover sheet and a warranty deed with a cover sheet. And interestingly, they provided that to me in the form of a Word document. And so here are both versions. So the first one is a version with a cover sheet. And then the second one is a warranty deed with no cover sheet. Maybe I got that reversed. Yeah, I got that reversed.
Further down.
So, okay. So these documents were provided to us in Word format with 10-point type, just to say, okay, here's what an hourglass document would look like in Word format with 10-point type. And so we tested it. So I used two methods. I saved it as an Adobe Acrobat document, and I ran it through a scanner as black and white, just to see what those would look like. And so the documents that we're looking at are basically converted to PDF format. And so in order to test them, we went the next step and we put them in our staging environment and ran it through the submission service. And we did the complete round trip all the way to the point of applying a recording stamp to it. Just to be clear, so nobody misunderstands, this is not in production, it's not real, it's just a test. It has false and incorrect data in it, all kinds of stuff here just to test it. And so this is the result after it has been through the recording process. And what you see here is both of the documents I have, they've been stamped and they're in 10-point type. And I guess it's a judgment call, but from our perspective, we would consider these to be legible documents. And so they would be processed and approved through the LRE submission service and have a sense of what they would look like if they came across your counter. We did this just because there's a pretty strong consensus in our standard subcommittee and in the document formatting working group that 10-point type across the board is a good place to be. And so to avoid surprises, we said, well, let's test that out. And this is what it looks like. So we kind of have two things happening at the same time with the bar. One is a conversation with our docs and indirectly with their formatting committee, whatever that may actually be called, to say, how do you feel about the current draft of the legislation that would specify updated formatting requirements? And then secondly, a broader discussion with the real estate section of the bar and their legislative liaisons to say, here is the direction we're going. We got this modernization thing happening. There would be a fee increase associated with it. And tell us how you feel. And that's kind of where we're at. The guidance that we have received from their legislative liaisons will sound familiar to you. They said, be realistic, be don't go overboard. And if you can provide some tangible benefits to our members, that would be great. And I would judge the general behavior of the bar representatives to be pretty positive. They haven't said no. They haven't said, you got too big a lift. And what we have shared with them up to this point suggests that they would be supportive of the overall initiative. I can't speak for them, but it's been a good conversation. So that's my update with regard to the bar at this point.
A couple comments from Melissa. If the document is going from 2 pages to 1 page, it would be a loss of revenue to counties with the new fee structure. Instead of $20 for a 2-page deed with 13 going to the county, it would be $10 with 3 going to the county. Huge budget impact to counties with the new fee structure. And then from David Erickson, I will speak to Tim Garten, chair of the real estate section, about the formation of the subcommittee.
Good.
That's all I got.
I don't think it can be denied that if the bar goes away from a standard template of 12-point type to 10-point type, that could affect pages. So for those of you who are on the fee policy working group, or that have attended one of my presentations recently on this, one of the scenarios that we put together is a scenario that presumes a reduction in pages to something lower than 4.5. And the result of that was that even then, you may have heard me earlier talk about a range of additional resources. Basically, that's what affects the range. If you make a certain assumption, you might be at a 45% increase. If you make another assumption, you could be at 70% increase. And then, no matter which of those assumptions you choose, if the economy gets just a little bit better, it's a positive for what reporting the income would be. So, I have to acknowledge any reasonable person would say, yeah, reduction in type could affect page count, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a negative overall for recording budgets, because we're talking about a degree of increase. We're not talking about anything that would decrease anybody's budget. And that's something that recorders do have to consider. It is a part of the equation. And assumptions about how a fee model will work does play into that. Other comments? Okay, David, since you added a comment in to the chat pod, is there any other comment that you would like to make? I know you probably can't say on behalf of the bar, whatever, but if you do have a perspective, I think we would be very interested in hearing any comment that you have.
Well, I would think that the bar would be in agreement with, these modernization topics that we're discussing. And I think it's just a matter of getting them to get the committee together and to be able to review them. So I don't see any real opposition from the bar, and that's just my own opinion.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. Okay. All right. Next on the agenda that the outline we put together was the Iowa Land Title Association. And we arranged a meeting with them back in early April. And this was with the executive director of ILTA, their lobbyists, and a couple of their officers. And in anticipation of that meeting, and they had received, as other stakeholder groups had received, copies of the abstract of modernization ideas. They had seen early versions of document formatting, policy changes. So they had access to it. In most cases, we have included our esteemed colleague Dylan Malone in those discussions. I think he attended maybe both of the most recent meetings that we had with ILTA. And I think I'm going to just say that the conversation that we've had with ILTA has been constructive. And there were two things that happened. One of them was they reviewed the modernization document that we shared, and I think in a very constructive way, they provided us with a set of questions in advance of the meeting. And the idea was just to kind of jumpstart and tell us some idea about what they were thinking or what their concerns or questions were. And it was all good. So this document that I believe I have shared with folks before, for sure the standard subcommittee, but possibly you guys as well, put together a Q&A document. And basically took every one of their comments and or questions and turned it into a Q&A to answer whatever their interest was. So they had questions about, what did we actually mean by an associated document? And so we responded, we defined that. They pointed out some issues or questions that they had about different topics. For example, it was interesting. One of the main, and you might help me remember this, but probably one of the main things that they had comments about was indexing notary information. And they said, gee, I don't think there was much value in that. And they even went so far as to say they were concerned that indexing notary information would be adding unnecessary workload to the reporters' offices. And I thought it was a very empathetic thing for them to say. And they asked about the Property Records Industry Association and did some of our ideas come from them? And of course, the answer is, at least in part, yes, there were. They also did ask some questions in writing about distributed ledger technology, but they were pretty straightforward, just kind of, what is this and why? And my answer has been the same. If you haven't noticed, the world is changing around us, and there are parties out there that are trying to remove intermediaries, and title people and recorders are in the group of intermediaries. So you have to ask yourself, well, should we be doing anything about that? And that's where the idea of having an IOR blockchain came from. And as you can see from the survey results, it didn't really rate that highly, and there doesn't seem to be much interest in it. So it didn't make it on the modernization priority list that I shared with you earlier. They asked about Back to Blue because they're interested in not hiding information that would affect their ability to conduct a title search, or in the case of title guarantee, that might affect underwriting and certain information wasn't available. And, I think we had a constructive conversation about the idea that whatever method we come up with, we need to find a way for authorized professionals to have access to the information, even if it's not available to the general public. And so I'm not going to go through the whole thing here, but very, very thorough discussion. I did my best to answer every question that they had. And then after that, we actually did have the meeting with them and went through several iterations of conversation about a written summary that we put together for them that focused on the discussion. And the main things we talked about actually in the meeting were associated references, parcel identification numbers, notary information, and they had an interesting idea that we haven't fully discussed with the surveyors yet, but they were interested in having surveyors make more explicit note reference in their documents to adjacent property. That was one of the things that they suggested. You know, since we had that meeting, I can't say we had a lot of direct conversation with them. I think they're interested in seeing what the next generation of the modernization initiative looks like. And at least in that meeting, they clearly said, whatever key policy recommendation you come up with, we're going to have to take to our board. You know, they did say that. And so they were very open and candid about that. Overall, I would still describe the meeting as constructive, professional. They did not really say anything negative about the overall initiative. They did qualify it by saying, hey, we'll have to take it back to our board, but it wasn't, hey, we're going to impose anything you do. You know, it wasn't like that. And then if you read through the survey results, it definitely does show that some at least individual abstractors are, you know, concerned about the very existence of ILR and publishing information online. They feel that way. And I don't know if we could ever persuade them otherwise. So what we're hoping is that as we put more specific details together about what the initiative is, we'll have another round of discussion with them to give them more information, which, you know, maybe fairly soon, given where we're at in the process. I would like to defer to Dylan. Did I fairly characterize the discussions that we had with the ILTA representatives?
Yeah, I think you did. I think we had a good conversation. I do think it was open, and I felt like they the board officers gave their opinions pretty freely, and yeah, I thought it was a very, very constructive conversation. I think everyone expressed a willingness to keep the lines of communication open, which is going to be big. So I obviously also sit on the ILTA board. You know, I think the survey responses will be really helpful for them in knowing how that informs the modernization topics going forward. And see that priority list will help the ILTA board too, in conjunction with whatever the actual fee proposal is.
Just any red flags in the survey results from their perspective?
No, I don't think. I think no, I didn't see anything in there that would make them have concern. I mean, obviously, you can sense their feedback in many of the responses, and I think that kind of shows through in the ultimate results and the numerical results too.
Questions from the committee or observers? Nancy, do you have any observations you would share too?
No, they were equally concerned about the historic surveys,
Mhm.
but I think after we talked about how it would be, they sounded okay with that. That it would mainly be by surveyors and not by abstractors, so I think they're receptive. They didn't say they'd give us what we wanted, but
I think one of the things about that was that if the separate recording of all the survey happened, or the separate storage of all the survey happened, is it going, their question was, is it going to be part of the current ILR system or would it be something separate? That those were one of their concerns, and also that if it's not a survey that has been recorded, it's not something we use. So they asked that question, and after it was answered, they were
And they did that because they didn't want us to have to do the notary indexing. Yeah, we don't see why you need to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, that kind of, let me go back to the agenda, make sure I'm not forgetting anybody. So what I've shared with you represents the materials that we have that kind of the supporting documents about where things stand. As I mentioned earlier in the meeting, we've had a couple of Zoom sessions with the county auditor's affiliate. Their most recent communique was back to us was that they had talked to their membership and they really didn't have a recommendation to make at this time. And I did follow up with them and say, and I really do feel this way. I don't know if just not doing anything is going to be the right answer, because once you get into the legislative process and people start talking about simplification ideas, somebody is going to say, well, what are you doing about the auditor thing? And it's going to be better for everybody if there's an answer to that question. So I'm not saying anything different will happen, but we did set the stage for another conversation with them sometime after they're done dealing with the election. So there will be more conversation with them on that topic. And then, I think it hopefully goes without saying, but, back in the beginning of the planning process, we had a meeting with Bill Peterson and Lucas, kind of talking about the general initiative, which was very positive. I hope everybody knows that we are going to circle back with them as soon as we have something more concrete to share with them. With the other stakeholders, particularly realtors and bankers, I would just assure you, we've made an equal effort to reach out to them and have conversations, and they just have not been ready. I think it kind of matches a pattern of behavior, shall I say, that they just have not been quick to say, hey, let's set up a subcommittee, or let's set up a joint discussion, or, they just have not been open to that. Part of it's just that because of the nature of the way their organizations are structured, and part of it's just individual behavior. But the next step in reaching out to both of those groups is, once we've got a final edit on the survey, we're going to use this as an opportunity to say, hey, we have new information out. We would like to talk to you. Please talk to us, and we'll see what happens. I would say something slightly different about the credit unions. The credit union representatives have been very interested in following this and engaging with it. There are some specific credit union representatives that have been kind of a part of our email list, that one of whom represents Green State Credit Union, that has been fairly vocal about a few things. But the bottom line is, it was probably the credit unions more than any other stakeholder group who expressed a strong interest in seeing the survey results. So I think that is definitely a positive. We have had very good communications with the leadership of the credit union. They just haven't been ready to talk details yet. So we'll be following up with them as well. So financial institutions and realtors, is still work to be done in that area. And I think another piece of unfinished business in the stakeholder group is some suggestions that we have a serious conversation with the Farm Bureau. They're interested in taxes and fees, and as we gather more details together, we're going to need to visit with them. I think the last part of the stakeholder strategy conversation is that Census and I recently met with Bob Rafferty and Nick Lane just to talk strategy and talk a little bit about who we're going to work with. We do expect changes in the committee structure, primarily because of the election. There are going to be new faces in the legislature. But I think we have some ideas about representatives who serve on either Ways and Means in the House and Senate or local government committees that we can begin to work with once we have a plan to start getting some bill requests in and start that process going. So I can't tell you today because I don't know yet exactly which legislators we're going to be seeking to be sponsors, but we have started that discussion and we'll just have to let that develop once we get the information pulled together. Did I miss anything, Census, on that?
Haven't. I think the part that we're going to have to work on too is just within the counties communicating with your legislators and having those conversations internally so that we build that support from legislators, because if we're able to have legislators on our back, it balances what the stakeholders might bring on the table, or it balances if they challenge certain things. So it goes back to more advocacy, more conversations, more meetings.
For those of you online that didn't hear exactly what Census said, I think she basically said we still also have to think about the grassroots advocacy and the need for reporters to be communicating with their own local stakeholders and representatives. Okay. Need to go back down the list here. So the next thing that I want to update you on and just have some conversation about is the document formatting and related policies. So what you have in your packet is a memo from me to you, dated May 30th, describing the current state of the modernization initiative relating to document formatting. The Standards Subcommittee had a meeting in April, and I presented to them a memo very similar to this one. The difference is that the Standards Subcommittee did make some changes, and those are reflected herein. So I guess the way I would characterize this is that the legislative changes that are being suggested and described in this memo represents what I would characterize as an endorsement from both the Standards Subcommittee as well as the document formatting work group that kind of has been working with them at the same point in time. And there are a couple of places in here where it does make reference to that there are a few things that still require some additional work. But this particular memo and the actual draft legislation that follows it does conform to the approval of the Standards Subcommittee and the document formatting working group. And essentially what we did was we didn't go through everything line by line, but we've been discussing this for months now. And we primarily talked about things that they wanted to change. So you'll see a few spots in the draft legislation that is highlighted in blue. And and when we get to the legislation, I'll cover those. So let's start with the First Amendment. Section 558.49 relates to indexing requirements for conveyance documents. Nancy alluded to this one earlier, and that is, we're going to be asking preparers of documents to do something that they may not have been used to doing before, and that is, in addition to providing a full legal description, we're going to be asking them to summarize the post-legal information. So if it's platted, they should actually summarize lot, subdivision name, city, town, county, and where appropriate to reference unplatted information such as section, township, and range. All of that with the idea of helping reporters access the information they need to do the post-indexing of location information. The other change from the earlier version that they looked at is to add some clarity to the addition of postal identification information of recently recorded conveyance documents. So we've had several discussions about this, and I think where the group settled and what was represented here is that if a conveyance document gets submitted for recording, the postal identification number should be included in the document so that you can record it, and so you can index it. And the idea is that when the document gets submitted, there is a postal identification number. Even if it's being subdivided, it's still the base postal ID number. The additional reference says that the updated, and I should say the new or the added postal identification number, if there is a subdivision, needs to be added to the recently recorded conveyance document. I think the important term is added, okay? In earlier conversations, I think there was a feeling that, no, I'm not going to alter that postal identification number that came in originally, it is what it is, and I'm not going to change that. And the idea of modifying an index to include a new postal identification number, I think was felt to be too close to changing it. But the real proposal is, if there is a new one due to a subdivision and it's recently recorded, the expectation would be the new one would be added to the index, keeping the old ones so that it's all there. Okay, so those are the only two changes in that particular section. I would just remind you that if you look at itemized number 4, and this was before the formatting committee did anything, so they didn't change this. But there was some question about, or confusion potentially, about if two parties don't sign the document on the same day, what is the date of the instrument? And what we tried to say here is that if there is a variance in the date of execution, the same date is what would be indexed. Just to provide a standard answer to that question. I don't think you should say one is right and one is wrong, but if you know what the definition is, it may be easier to deal with.
The only thing I have with that is the actual bar forms do say dated. And those are not always the same as all the signatures.
And that's what we use.
So we go by, when it says dated, that's what we go by. So it's not exactly the most.
And I would hope that in the conversations with the bar, I would ask group that they would say something about that.
Okay.
I hope they will.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm looking at the the parcel identification number when present on a document submitted for recording. So are you stating that they shall have the parcel identification number on the document?
That's.
If you go,
I'm on page 155.
Okay, that's for the indexing.
Right. Because my comment is that we don't do the parcel numbers, and after they're recorded and scanned, they go to the auditor's office. And in fact, the auditor's office uses copies to do their, and then they put in the parcel number. We never see it before it's recorded. So how do you?
I think the operative issue is, if you go to the revised version of subsection 2 of 331-606B, the current statute and even the new statute still says parcel identification number. Okay, and in your packet, I'm looking at page 159. Okay, so item J is the updated version of this, and it says the current parcel identification numbers as applicable. So parcel ID numbers are not always applicable to every document. It's applicable to certain documents. And then the indexing requirement really is about being present. So that's why the operative phrase "if present" is there, because I felt like I heard loud and clear from the standards subcommittee and the formatting working group that, if you want us to index it, it better be on the document.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would like to be able to have the index and have the parcel number on there. And I am going back 40 plus years, but all the deeds used to go over to the auditor's office before we even scan them. Because what's going to happen is if they put the parcel number on the deed after we indexed it and scanned it, it's not going to be on the deed. So it would be nice if we started out with, if it's on there, but it'd be nice to get the preparers to put it on there, to get in the habit of putting it on there. Because I would like it to be on there, and it'd be nice to have it on the index or on a scanned version that's going to show up. So, I mean, I guess at the very beginning, I can see where this isn't going to be universal,
Right.
especially for me.
In some systems, I know that with solutions, it talks to the auditor transfer people, the real estate people, and it goes back in and puts it. We don't do that right now because of our north and south issue, but we're gonna try to do it. So it'll go in and put that parcel ID like when splits are done. Or if it's fixed later, it'll go in and put them there. Is that correct? You do that, don't you?
We don't do it on our
Well,
system, but the auditor's office does.
The
it on their
auditors, yeah,
system.
the auditors
They
office
pull,
does it.
they pull,
Yeah, they pull those over.
and I
So
think
we're-
there's a way that if it's set up, we can pull from them for like mortgages and stuff, but I would not know that we don't have it set up. I
Yeah,
don't know if
we don't
anybody
have
does.
it
in our
set up.
north south.
But
I
the
know
auditor's
that
office does put it in the system
I think that
for the
does
assessor too, but not for us.
I think Sue Meyer might have said it first.
So I guess as long as it's someplace.
Okay, well,
But I don't know if it's going to be on our system. That's what I'm
I
saying.
hate to bounce around.
That's okay.
There's different sections here.
Wait, wait.
There, hold on to that. If you take all the sections together, okay, it is adding, and I think emphasizing a requirement that preparers include the parcel identification number. This is part of the conversation with the bar and other groups to say, hey, you have to start doing this.
Right.
Okay. Another part of it is if you were to go to page 157. Okay. And I want to draw your attention to, let me make sure. It's like 2 paragraphs above item number 2. So here's 2 in the middle, and then the other paragraphs are not numbered yet, but it includes the language that says, when present in a document or instrument for recording, parcel identification number shall be indexed. If a parcel identification number is modified by the county, such as for a subdivision or consolidation of a parcel, the county auditor shall timely provide any updated parcel identification number to the recorder. Okay? So you've got an emphasis on 3 parties. You've got prepare, if it's relevant, include the parcel identification number. Recorder, if it's present, index it. Auditor, if you change it, you have a responsibility to notify the recorder. Okay? There are 3 legs to this stool. They're represented in different sections of the code, but it's all there. And if you're gonna accept the idea that parcel identification numbers have value, which it does, in my opinion, then everybody's got to play. Everybody has to contribute to it. So that is the balance that is represented here, taking these 2 sections together.
I'm just saying that I don't think it's practical in my office to be able to get the parcel number before. And you're saying, I see what this says. If it's present, then I need to index it.
Right.
But I just don't think it's practical that I would be able to have the parcel number if it's not there and put it and enter it at the same time I'm indexing it.
But we don't have to. If it's
Right. And that's what I'm saying. I'm looking at that and I see that, but I would like to be on board with doing that. And I just don't see it. And that's why I'm saying that we need to make sure that the people that are preparing it, I don't want to reject it either if it doesn't have it.
Probably most of the majority of your deeds and stuff, they will know their parcel.
I guess I'm
Because
saying
it's
things that
only
you've
really-
already covered. I'm saying things that you've kind of already taken care of.
That there is an expectation implicit here that the other officers in the county who have control over assigning postal identification numbers inform you of the changes that are made. And continuing on in this sentence, it does say, shall be added to the index of the applicable recently recorded document. And the timeline on that was also a subjective discussion, because, and then Lisa said, well, we only do that once every 6 months or whatever, right? Okay, but in other counties, it might be 30 days or whatever it is. And that's why we are using the phrase as soon as practicable. Okay, so practical means when it's possible to do. If you don't have the information for 6 months, you can't do it until you get it, right?
Well, I'm just thinking too, if that property, I mean, some of my properties transfer, boom, 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 boom. And it may transfer 3 or 4 times, but I'm only going back to the most recent, not all of the 6.
But if they do it boom, 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 when the new transaction happens, you're getting the new postal identification number,
Right, but
right?
if you're talking months in between.
Yeah.
Well, no, once that first deed's recorded and it has a parcel ID, then the next time it transfers, that should be on your deed the next time. And then the next time it transfers, it should be on that deed.
Depends on when they
according
do
to
the
the new
split.
rules. Do what?
It depends on when they do the split.
Yeah, but we're talking afterwards, after adding the
Okay.
splits. It's not gonna.
So
So,
Lisa, are you saying?
so what I'm saying is, so what you're saying is,
From the time of the
okay,
last
so let's say
recording,
I
they
record
do the
40
parcel
deeds
ID number and the transfer.
today.
Yeah.
Say half of them don't have parcel numbers on. So when they go to the auditor's office and when they add the parcel numbers, they send it back to me and
They
say,
send you the parcel
and send me the parcel numbers.
and you would add them to your indexing.
And from then
So
on. if
we're
they-
saying that it really, we have to have parcel numbers. So when there's not one there, I don't have to enter it into my indexing system. But the auditor's office is responsible for sending it to me if they put one on there.
splits and stuff, yeah, and separate subdivisions. But then once you get that, once they're assigned those numbers and then they're transferred, anytime after that, it should be on any future deeds.
Right.
Okay, Lisa, you
Okay.
have comments?
From Erin, she said we have solutions set up to update the parcel number from the transfer service, but it's a process we have to do.
Yeah.
So Erin, are you entering it and selecting something to update?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Tim,
I have an idea, but go ahead. I have an idea of how to do, but it doesn't.
okay, so this is all being presented to you as this is where we are right now. What we expect to happen is that the stakeholders are going to have input into this, right? We're trying to facilitate that conversation to vet all of these potential issues. Okay. I didn't speak to it specifically earlier, but part of the conversation we're having with the auditor's office is not just about the auditor's transfer fee, but we're also talking to them about postal identification numbers.
Very good.
So, getting parcel identification numbers, I would stipulate, is a good thing. It's a good idea because it will be useful to searchers and it will also be useful in tying information together with other data because it is a keystone. And if Sue Meyer were here, who's participated in all the PREA discussions on this, she would say, yeah, it's kind of a required thing to do these days. So we just have to figure out how is the best way to do it. This is how far we've advanced so far. Okay.
I will make a side note. We have been doing it in Webster County, adding parcel numbers in. We get a list weekly and go back in and we literally copy paste from the list that we get. We get ours from the assessor's office. It's just the way it's set up here in Webster County. And it's a pretty smooth process. And then the second person does verify that information. So I support the PIN being indexed.
And I will note in Des Moines County, we followed, I guess, Webster County and also do that. Our auditor every day sends us from what deeds are transferring. That parcel number, which we input, unless there's going to be a split, we do not input it if it does not have a current parcel number. Because at the time of recording, it didn't have the number, so we do not input that, at least as of this time.
And are we just doing the parcel numbers on conveyances? Not mortgages or anything like that?
We put them in if it's on the mortgage now. Thank you.
We should add, Nancy, that we're having a similar conversation with surveyors, okay? You know, about whether they should include it on their documents as well.
Yeah.
So,
Question I had on the legal description is adding the section township range for platted. I'm a little concerned by that because that's obviously not current practice. So usually if it's platted land, we just have subdivision, city, maybe county. So that's a concern I have with that, and it's just it would alter our current legal descriptions in abstracts and title opinions and deeds. Also a concern with having it on the cover sheet. The question I have is if we're like kind of firmly saying that it should be on the cover sheet, or could be on the cover sheet, what happens if there's discrepancy between the two? As might be have that's
Well, I don't
our
think
biggest claims of legal descriptions. So
the argument hasn't been settled yet as to whether the cover page is part of the document, so.
right.
So just because there is a cover sheet out there in the form doesn't mean it's.
Right.
We don't index off the cover page.
That's my input is I'm concerned about that.
you're concerned about your staff, well, so noted. I think this is a conversation that any document preparer is going to ask. Okay, one thing we know for sure is that if if submitters do not include unplatted information on a document, even if it's platted land, and if the recorders do not index that information, you cannot find that document searching by section, township, and range today. So the goal is not to create difficulty, but to ease the ability to search for documents that have property information, not just by whether they're platted or unplatted. I'm gonna make you sit in on a planning meeting with the surveyors if you keep this up.
I would appreciate it. And if I search and it's platted land, I'm never gonna think to search by second township range anyway. I'm gonna go right to the platted, because it's already been platted, so. But I'm also in a different lens in the survey, so.
Why can't it be
So-
searched by section, township, range?
Right, currently, right.
But why? Just the way it's indexed?
That's my thought, is it's not indexed by that. It's
Well,
indexed
sorry,
by-
I don't mean if it is like, within a city or something. I thought Phil had said if it's only a section, township, range, it currently cannot be searched.
If there is, okay, I'm representing the surveyors right now, when they're at, now, who want to be able to search by section, township, and range, even if it is platted, okay? And so the idea is, we're not going back in time. This is take forward only. That prepares include section, township, and range, because even platted land is in a section, township, and range. And if it is present on the document, including the cover page, then it is easier to index because the information is there. Okay. And one of the things we're trying to do is, how do we make it feasible for the recorder to index section, township, and range and platted land without going to the full legal description and trying to read it and figure it out? Why can't we have the preparer help us with that?
I guess my issue with that is, that's gonna make a change in every abstractor and document preparer to just help the surveyors.
Right,
I guess
because I
my
don't see any
concern.
benefit to anybody besides the surveyor.
Yeah.
On that. And like in Wright County, Clarion sits in 4 townships. So you have one town. So then you're gonna have, that's gonna be kind of a pain, because it's like, okay, well, where's Fox Edition? Is it in, what's that, 9123 or is it 9120, And if it's just benefiting the surveyors alone, I don't.
Well,
Or just
my
more
thought
results
is,
and make
I'm,
results.
go ahead, Phil.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, if I'm understanding right, so you're saying, when you say plotted, so you're saying if it's in a subdivision that obviously came from a section, township, range, they need to have that subdivision and the section, township, range?
That is the idea, yes.
Okay, so I guess, as far as the auditor in the legal description and how much to charge, that's one thing we look for without having to read every word in a legal description. How many subdivisions are on there, or, section, township, range. So I could see, at least here in Des Moines County, where it could get a little, just having to spend more time reading that legal to take it in, saying, okay, this is in the city of Burlington, but is it also in a section, township, and range, or is it coming from that section, township, range? Just my thought.
Everything is in the
It's
section.
in a section,
Right.
everything.
Right.
Yes.
Right, I get that, but sometimes it's, and. So you have, let's say, Stepner subdivision. So I'm gonna collect a $5 auditor fee for that. And in section 27, 70, and 10. So I'm gonna collect another $5 auditor fee for that. It's easy just to look at that legal and see, okay, I'm collecting that $10 versus if I say Stepner subdivision coming from, frick from there.
Yeah.
I just think it's more
Well-
information that's gonna need to be on there. That's gonna be confusing.
Well, yeah, if you look at a full legal description, lot 1, lot 2, box edition, Clarion, Iowa, Wright County, that is a full legal description.
Right.
Yeah, why do we need to elaborate on that, I guess?
Well, we're gonna bring a surveyor to the next meeting. And I think this is a fair discussion. This is what happens when you try to take ideas and meld them into a single idea. We started this conversation because surveyors said, I want to be able to search by unplatted information and be able to find platted land. Okay, that's what they said. And then we started it by saying, okay, well, hey guys, we already have this data element in our system for section. Why don't we just use that? And then when we had that discussion, they said, no, that doesn't work because there are multiple things in the same section. So it doesn't really help us. We have to have the section, township, and range in order to make this useful for us. And what they have consistently said for several years now is that they don't want to be constrained by having to choose between searching for platted or unplatted land. They just want to have all of the data elements accessible together so that they can search a combination of a subdivision name and a section, township, and range. And the way our search structure is set up right now, they cannot do that. They just can't. It is, they may be the only ones, but that's something that they want.
I understand.
Yeah. So you're gonna make me play the Rolling Stones for them at the next meeting, okay? All right, so, a good discussion, I think it is important from the standpoint that, everything that you've seen in here has been in previous versions of documents, but this section, township, and range is a new addition from what you have seen, previously. So, I would generally just want to make sure everybody knows that this is representative of the direction that the standard subcommittee and the document formatting group wants to go. There are items in blue that have been modified since they saw it. This had been provided to them, but we haven't had a meeting to talk about it. One of the things that they did talk about is that in the subsection 2, I kept trying to swim upstream against the idea of having all the prepared information in there, and the committee really insisted they wanted it in there, and then they added in the phrase either the telephone number or email address, because some folks wanted to see the email address if it was possible to facilitate communication, which we did talk about some privacy issues associated with that, but this is where the subcommittee did end up on that particular point.
Natalie has a question. Wasn't an email on surveys discouraged? Was the email on surveys discouraged from Natalie?
If you're asking me about the conversation, I guess I did raise the issue of, do we really want to include emails in documents for privacy and spam and concerns like that? And where they ended up settling was, well, let's give them the option. We either want a phone number or we want an email, either or. So in my discussion, I would say, yes, I did not encourage that. That is something.
And that's on all document types, so it doesn't matter if it's a survey. Is that,
no,
Natalie, am I
this
representing
is
that correctly?
Well, this section, this subsection of the code includes everything but the survey,
Okay.
okay?
Yeah, I was thinking back a while ago with the survey, when they had the index legend, when all that came about and discussed that there was a reason that email was discouraged, but that was a
Well,
while ago, so maybe
this is a great segue because I want to share with you, this is new to all of your eyes, not to the subcommittee with the surveyors. And that is a potential new section of the Iowa Code specifically relating to surveys and index legends. Since I published this for the packet, we've had another round of emails between surveyors and reporters on the subcommittee making further edits. I think the main point I want to share with you is that in subsection 3, this is where the formatting requirements for surveys would be found. And then in terms of the content of the index legend, this is where the information is about, and I think the current version of this says, sorry, it's not highlighting for me, but it says the surveyor's name, mailing address, and other contact information. So the current version of this draft doesn't say anything about email specifically. It relates to other contact information. If that's something that you want to be more specific about, like saying phone number or email, that could be discussed with the survey group. So the point of this is just to let you know that there are some corresponding changes that could be made in the code that would kind of just consolidate all of the survey requirements into one section. Not finalized, still subject to discussion, but want you to be aware of it and open to comment. This is very much still draft, so anything that happens will be brought back to the appropriate groups for review. Great discussion today. So the last thing I want to cover, and I know we're a little bit over time, but that we're still in the same boat. Every time we get to PRIA, we run out of time. But I would just mention to you, sharing with you for your information, that the first document that you have is on page 165 of your packet. And this is the current draft of what will be the next PRIA paper on blockchain. And this is the work group that I have been working on. Basically, our group is kind of editing the entire paper right now. And in terms of things that we're saying about blockchain is the PRIA group's trying to be educational, and there are a few of us that have been more in the category of suggesting caution. And mostly the caution is expressed about the fact that blockchain advocates, there's a little bit of hyperbole in what they say about how immutable and wonderful blockchain is. But at the same time, as we've done more and more research about it, it's not as a technology shouldn't be scary. It's another form of a database. It certainly has certain characteristics. The thing to be concerned about is how the private sector wants to use it. And if they want to use it to replace the public land registry, then maybe caution should be expressed. Okay. And there really are private developers and startup companies out there trying to do this. They really want to do real estate transactions using tokens, not in the traditional way. And one of the conclusions that we've reached is they're not going to be able to do that easily because of the body of law that exists that says real estate transactions have to be done this way. But we also have to be aware of the fact that we should not be surprised if at some point somebody presents a change in the law to make that possible. And generally speaking, we're moving in that direction. You know, the SEC and the regulators at the federal level are moving in a direction to regulate, not prohibit. That means that there could be changes in rules. And, you know, I probably have been one of the most vocal opponents in the career world about blockchain. But at the same time, if it's going to happen, what can we do to have some measure of control over it? And that's where I'm coming from. So the idea of having a blockchain for ILR, it was intended to raise questions and to cause people to ask, what do you want? And frankly, I think it would be important to know if anybody in the private sector in Iowa really wanted to do that. And if they did, they had an opportunity to come forward. But they didn't do that. And that's why it's not making the modernization list. But this version of the document is pretty close to where we're heading with the paper. And I would just commend you to review it at your leisure. Then I have been asked about this after the last meeting, and just to make sure everybody had it, I put the information about the survey response on blockchain, just so you had the information for your reference. And the other thing about PRIA that I'm sharing with you is starting on page 181, the PRIA folks gave me permission to share this with you, but it's not published yet. This particular draft is going to be presented to the PRIA board at their next meeting for a 30-day review. I think Lisa has actually sat in on some of those meetings. And part of this is they began to explore the question of what other information should recorders be indexing. And this particular list that is found on the table of contents includes things like notary information, postal identification numbers, consideration amounts, and so on. I will say that if you read the executive summary, the current version of the paper doesn't really make any recommendations. It just says that there are some potential benefits of doing so, and it's going to be up to recording jurisdictions to decide. But most of the paper is in the form of sort of a pros and cons. You know, if you index, here are the potential benefits. But if you do, here are some challenges that you might face. So I would say, if asked the question, did part of the origin of the idea of indexing notary information come from the work that was being done at PRIA? I have to be honest and say, yeah, that was part of the origin of it. The other part of the origin is that through various sessions I participated in, we know that crooked notaries are one source of property fraud. And so if we have an ability to track them, maybe we could come closer to prevention if we know and can observe what people are doing. That said, notary information did not rank very highly in the survey. Nobody jumped out and said, wow, that's a great idea. Let's do that. I don't think we gained anything in terms of promoting the modernization initiative, that there really is support for it. So we raised the flag, nobody saluted, lowering the flag and moving on. For the ESS committee, I would just commend, take a look at this. We do get ideas from Korea. Sometimes we take them seriously. And this is an example of that. So going back to where we left up, where we started, there's a whole lot more work to do. We need to see where the association stands on fee policy. And we're going to have to continue to work with stakeholder groups to get their input and ideas, because at the end of the day, we want to make things better, and we want bipartisan, universal support for whatever initiative gets presented in January of 2025. That's what we're shooting for. So I hope you feel like we had a good discussion today, because that's why we had this meeting. And decisions are still ahead of you all.
I felt like it was a good discussion. Fair.
Okay. Madam Chair, I have nothing for you today, nothing more for you today.
Okay, does anybody have any questions, comments? If not, then we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We're out of here. Next meeting will be August 15th.